Okay, I think we're live. I'm gonna go to the page just to check. What's up, everybody? I hope you can hear me fine, see me fine. If not, you know what to do. Okay, I think we're live. Let me know in the chat room if the video audio quality is crap. But anyway,
On my channel. Okay,
I'm
hold on.
here. You got some technical difficulties? No worries.
Yes, I thought I was live. I guess not. So let me try to get this going. It said I was live.
Okay, just do your thing.
Okay.
Anyway, I am here today with Brandon, who has a YouTube channel, which will be linked in the description later on when I get to it, or maybe he could plug his channel also. And some of you guys remember I put out a video calling out vegans to debate name the trade, so on and so forth. And coincidentally, unbeknownst to me, Brandon did the same thing. So I happened to find his video calling out meat eaters to debate name the trait, and I took it from there. We just linked up, set up this debate, and this is it. Someone in the chat is saying, "Let the circus begin." Look, uh, I don't think that's going to be the case. Anyway, did you figure your stuff out?
Yes, I think I'm live. I have my girlfriend watching over there, and she says there's a little bit of a delay, but that's expected. So yeah, I think we're good to go.
Right on. So why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so like you said, my name's Brandon. I just started this channel a few months ago. The main thing of my channel isn't necessarily veganism. That's just a part of it. I also like talking about politics. I am fairly left-leaning, so if you like left-leaning views when it comes to politics, that's probably the main point of my channel. But this veganism thing, I do like doing it as well. Oh, you can't hear me?
I can hear you.
I'm sorry. My girlfriend's telling me that they can't hear you, which is odd.
Can you guys in the chat room? So hold on one second. Can you guys hear Brandon in the chat room? Let me know. Or is it just me talking to you guys? I can hear him fine.
Okay.
Hello?
I mean, if worse comes to worse, I'll just steal your video off your channel and I'll put it on mine. I'm not sure why they can't hear you. That's odd.
No problem. They can. I just got confirmation. Everything is fine.
All right.
Maybe
Cool.
anyway, continue.
Yeah. So that's the main point of my channel. I like talking about politics. I like talking about veganism. I may do some other things talking about like pop culture and what's going on in that, but it's not like I actually care about that stuff. It's just entertaining and funny to talk about. So yeah, that's what I do.
Right on. And for the record, in case there's some slowpokes listening, watching, you're vegan. Obviously, I'm not. I was curious, wanted to ask you how long you've been vegan, and maybe you want to tell us why, for what reasons.
Yeah, for sure. So I've been vegan for about, how long's it been? going on 3 years. And what really convinced me was this, and I'm sure you know the guy. It was a lecture that Gary Yourofsky did, and and I literally went vegan the next day. I would say the ethical reason is mainly why I went vegan. The health and the environmental aspect played a part as well, but I wouldn't say as big of a part as the ethical implications did. So that's why I'm vegan. That's about how long I've been vegan. Yeah.
Gary Yourofsky, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, a lot of people like that talk. I guess he's a pretty influential guy, or at least used to be. But that's what's up. So, how long have you been vegan? Sorry, I was a little distracted. Did you?
No, you're fine. I'm distracted over here as well. I'm trying to make sure my stream's running fine. Yeah, so about 2 years going on 3 years. I think July will hit the 3 year mark, because the only reason I know that is because I went vegan like a week after my birthday. My birthday's in July, so that's kind of how I keep track of how long I've been vegan.
Mm-hmm. So you did it for ethical reasons first and foremost, and everything else is basically a bonus cherry on top.
Basically, yeah.
Okay, cool. And I'm guessing you're committed. You're gonna. So far, so good. You're a vegan. You have no intentions of ditching veganism, and because you are convinced that it's the ethical thing to be a vegan, that is, you're also sent out this challenge to any meathead such as myself to try to disprove what it is that you believe, more or less, right?
Well, I wouldn't. I mean, I am very convinced of the ethics behind it, just because of where I start in my moral system.
Hmm.
So, according to my own moral system, it wouldn't make sense for me not to be vegan. So that's. I mean, I can be convinced otherwise. I've heard consistent positions that are anti-vegan, like when Ask Yourself and Destiny talked about that. I mean, and Vegan Gains and um, Destiny talk. They couldn't really drill him down with the consistency
Hmm.
because he was being consistent. But I would say, according to my own moral system, it's his moral system would be absurd. So that's why do you keep showing me that? I'm sorry. She's like showing me my stream. But yeah, I mean, I would be convinced otherwise if somebody has a better argument that would conform to my moral system. So I'm not like dogmatic about it, but I just haven't seen a convincing argument otherwise. And I'm assuming you haven't been convinced, at least according to your own moral system, that veganism would be the most ethical position for you.
Yeah, I don't think it is actually. So the way you break this down, you use name the trade. Obviously, that is what you wanted to debate. That is,
Right.
I call it a trick, but it's a syllogism that you think is a bulletproof argument for why veganism is the morally correct choice.
Um, the morally correct choice. Let me think about that. Well, depending on what you value at first.
Hmm.
So yes, according to my own moral system, that it would be bulletproof if, like I said, it depends on what you value.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's really just a consistency test. It's not like it's a moral argument to where it's telling you you should be vegan. It's just testing your moral system to see if you are consistent within that system.
So it's a logical consistency test of any one subjective ethical system.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, I'm pretty sure you're aware of this. I'm just kind of
Yeah.
explaining for the audience
Yeah,
in
yeah,
case
yeah,
they
yeah.
don't know.
I think we're gonna do quite a bit of that actually, because I think not to get too bogged down, but sometimes I think we're going to have to explain what it is we're saying exactly, because I'm guessing just like myself, you have delved into this name the trait stuff, and you could probably just talk about it all day without really explaining, without holding people by their hand, because you don't need that, but some people might actually. So yeah,
Right.
I think we'll end up clarifying a lot of stuff. But anyway, are you interested in having a formal debate or just a discussion?
Uh, it depends. What do you mean by formal debate?
Where we set some kind of rules before we get into it, and then there's going to be a winner and a loser. And look, I'm not interested in ego tripping or anything like that, but I think if we could determine that there is a winner and a loser, then what that means is that one of us is wrong. And for example, if I lose, I either go vegan or I'm going to remain ethically inconsistent within my own logical system by continuing to eat meat. And I have to admit to that, right? That I'm just unethical, period, according to me, and maybe even you. But let's say, you lose, and you can't prove that name the trade is valid. You can no longer use it as a valid argument, or you are the one who's being unethical, for example. And we'd have to establish what it means to win or lose before we even get there, right? So that's what I mean by more of a formal debate. If you just want to like have a discussion, I'm okay with that too. But you said debate, and I said debate, so I'd rather have more of a formal debate if you're cool with that.
Yeah, that's fine. I saw that you and Ask Yourself kind of had this, and you guys went on for about 20 minutes, and it was kind of frustrating to watch.
It was very frustrating to be there.
Oh, and by the way, the boy himself, Ask Yourself, he tweeted me and he just wanted to let you know that the debate offer, it's still open, and you know how to reach him if you do want to take him up on that. He just wanted me to inform you.
Yeah, I don't care. He's got my email address. Whatever. It's not about him. He knows where to find me, and that's fine. But anyway, that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah, so if you want to set the parameters, and I'm assuming it's going to be something like, if I can show that your moral system is inconsistent, or that it leads to a moral absurdity that most people would find to be absurd, then I would be the winner, right?
I don't actually agree with the second part, but we can get to that in just a second. I agree with the first part. If I'm logically inconsistent, then I lose, then you win, right? So far so good, yeah?
Yeah, for sure.
So how do we resolve this problem? Because I know what, if I do remain logically consistent in certain situations, you say that, that may lead to moral absurdity, but what do you mean by moral absurdity?
Yeah, sure. So it's more about, rhetorically speaking. Most people would find that if you say intelligence is the trait, that would justify killing it would justify a holocaust of mentally challenged people. Most people would find that morally absurd, rhetorically speaking. So that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but you're a moral relativist. You believe morality, the nature of morality is subjective.
Sure.
So why are you seemingly telling me that I must live up to somebody else's standard? Essentially, if we do get to that point where, I do name intelligence, let's say, even though I'd never do that, and that obviously would mean that I'm okay with killing, murdering, and eating stupid people. You're going to say, well, most people would disagree with that, but that's an appeal to popularity. Who cares what most people think, right? What most people
Well,
think doesn't.
That's why I said rhetorically speaking. I mean, this isn't like some sort of logical thing. It just has to do with with what most people think. So, I mean, if you don't want to set that parameter, that's fine. But
Well, we can, but most people think eating meat is okay. So I don't. Do I win? You know what I mean? Like, is that something we want to appeal to? Popularity? Because if we're to have a logical debate, that's a logical fallacy, isn't it?
well, that's why I'm talking rhetorically. I'm not speaking it logically. You can that's fine if you want to dismiss it, but that's why I'm talking about rhetorically.
But that wouldn't make me immoral within my own
According
logical.
to right, according to your own moral system, of course not.
So, well,
But according to most people's moral system, it probably would be. That's fine. I would accept that as a win, but if you don't want to set that parameter, that's fine.
no, I'll accept it. That's fine. I'll accept it as long as that still doesn't mean that it doesn't imply that I have to go vegan, obviously, right? Because I'm not immoral. It's just most people disagree with me, and so
Sure.
what? Okay, but that is a win condition. I'm okay with that. If you're okay with that, I'm okay with that.
Okay, cool.
So
Do you just want to jump right in? And I'll just lay out the typical name the trait argument. So, what is true of an animal that, if were true of a human, would make it justified to kill the human?
oh well, hold on.
Hmm.
Something else I wanted to add. So you also have to remain logically consistent, right, throughout the debate.
Of course.
Of course. So if I could show that you're not logically consistent, I win.
Correct.
Okay. If we're both logically inconsistent, then I guess it's a stalemate.
Well, it depends. I mean, if we're adding what most people would find morally absurd, then it would depend on that.
Gotcha.
That's what it would fall back on.
We would defer to that. Okay, that's fine.
Exactly.
That makes sense to me. Okay, so yeah, if you want to unload name the trait, I say go for it, but please start with the major premise and then go on to the minor premise and then make the conclusion. Don't just like go into the conclusion because it's a syllogism, right? It starts with a very important premise.
Oh, do you want me to like lay out the actual premises and stuff?
Yeah. The whole argument, as it were.
Okay, so I mean, if you give me a second, I can actually pull up the syllogism. Do you want me to do that?
You can. I have it pulled up so I could could read it out too if you'd like. But yeah, go on ahead.
All right, give me one
It's
second.
not a yeah.
Let me pull it up here in the Google Docs.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know what a syllogism is a logical device, if you would, that consists of a major premise, a minor premise, and a conclusion that has to follow from these premises. It's an argument of sorts, I guess. Like, and as Brandon will tell you when he finally comes back, this syllogism that is named a trait contains two premises and an eventual conclusion. The first premise being humans are of moral value. And obviously we have to agree on one premise before we can move on to the next premise, and before we could both conclude something, we obviously have to be in agreement on these premises. And without these premises, the argument doesn't work. So if one of the premises is not true, the conclusion therefore logically cannot be true.
Okay, I got it pulled up, and you're referring to the informal version, which I used on my channel, and that was basically just for because most people, they're not into philosophy or anything like that. So the informal version that I used on my channel isn't necessarily the what's it called, just more valid version. So that's the informal version. I don't know if valid was the right word there, but I'll just read off the actually formal argument here. So if your view affirms a given human is trait equalizable to a given non-human animal while retaining moral value, then your view can only deny the given non-human animal has moral value on pay of P and not P.
No, that's not name the trait. Name the trait. The first premise of name the trait is humans are of moral value.
Well, that's the informal version. This is actually the formalized version of the
Yeah,
argument.
let's stick to the informal version that everybody always uses, that you used on your channel, the one that I'm familiar with. Instead of making the simple more complicated, let's just say that. I mean, do you have a problem with humans are of moral value?
Oh, no, of course not.
Okay, so is it fair enough to say humans are of moral value instead of all that other very confusing and convoluted stuff that you just said?
Yeah, sure. We we can use
Because
the
people aren't going to be able to follow what the hell you're saying, and I have to admit I kind of tuned out too, because it's just and
right.
people
It's a little more right. It's a little more wordy. I mean, if you go, I literally have it up on my screen on my channel. If you want to look at the actually formalized version of it,
I've never heard
but
of
yeah,
this version. I don't know where this version comes from. I've never actually heard of it. So
yeah,
if
that's not a
you're
problem.
okay with humans are of moral value, I am as well.
I gotcha. Okay. What I don't even. Do you just want to read it off then? What's the second premise? Because I
Yeah.
don't have that
So
one in front of me.
so we both agree that humans are of moral value.
Yeah.
Okay. And without this, the argument doesn't work. And then the second premise, as it is listed on Wikipedia, as I've always heard it, and there are various versions of this, definitely, but it basically goes like this: there is no trait absent in animals, which, if absent in humans, would cause us to deem ourselves valueless. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay, so you're basically trying to, just for the audience, name the trait that is absent in animals, that if humans did not possess this trait, for example, intelligence, it would be okay to treat humans the way we treat animals at this point in time in society. Are you still on board with what I just said?
I think so. So if there is a trait that's lacking in an animal, if that trait was lacked in a human, it would be morally justified to kill that human. If that's what you said, I agree
Yeah,
with that.
yeah, it would be right. Kill the human or do whatever it is that we consider okay to do with animals. You could do that to the human being just the same.
Right. So,
But here we're mostly concerned with killing and eating.
well, not necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just concerned more about the um, killing. I mean, the eating afterwards is kind of an after effect of
Okay.
what we would consider a
Right.
immoral action.
Killing for food or whatever, killing in any way.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Okay. Yeah.
I'm okay with that. Yeah. So the conclusion is, if I cannot name this trait, that as if it were, that animals don't have if it were not present in human beings. If I cannot name this trait, according to name the trait, I contradict myself by deeming animals valueless.
Right. According to the informal version, right.
Mm-hmm. So your position is that humans, that you cannot name the trait that animals lack that would make it okay to treat humans in the way we currently treat animals, or to kill animals if humans also did not possess this trait.
Well, you can name a trait and you can be consistent.
Right.
But I would say that if you do name a trait and you remain consistent, like we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, that it would probably lead to something morally absurd according to most people's moral system.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have a trait to throw out there?
Well, I reject name the trait as I just, why is it logical? I don't think it is. Like, can you prove to me the validity of name the trait? Can we put name the trait to a test where you should be able to justify veganism, right? Eating plants with name the trait, for example. And if you can, then name the trait is, because I don't. It's a fallacy. It's not. I'm not convinced that it's actually a good test of one's. I think it's flawed, basically. So I want you to prove to me, if you can, that name the trait actually does the thing that you say it does. That it will point out a logical contradiction within my own ethical system, and that you won't have this contradiction within your own ethical
Well,
system.
if I'm putting up the argument with premises and a conclusion, the burden would be on you to either point out which premise is unsound. That's basically that's how it works. I lay out the argument, and you point out which premise you think is unsound. So
Okay.
that's why I tried to bring it back to the actually formalized version, because the informalized version, it's not exactly valid in that sense.
Okay, so one way to point out how naming a trait is flawed is by using this hypothetical example, or trait, intelligence, right? If I say that the trait is intelligence, which I wouldn't do, I'm just doing it hypothetically, what would your answer to that be?
Well, yeah, as you know, it would just be okay. So if a human has the same intelligence as the animal that you're killing, like a chicken or a cow, would it be morally justified to kill that human in that case?
It wouldn't be morally okay to kill that human.
Okay, why?
Read the premise number one. What's the premise number
Well,
one?
yeah, that's why I wanted to use the formalized version.
What's wrong with humans are of moral value?
Because there are different caveats that go into that. So this is exactly why I didn't want to use the informal version, because it's not necessarily valid.
But that's the only version you've ever used in any of your videos. So why are we
Right.
using some
And,
different version right now?
well, that's why I explained, because most of the people that are watching my videos, they're not philosophy heads. They're not going to understand the formalized version. They're going to get lost in the words.
Right. So
So,
why not use the version they do understand? If aren't they the same?
well, I did use the version that they would understand. That's why I use the informal version in my video. That if I want, I can make a whole 30-minute long video like Ask Yourself did, and actually go through each premise and go through exactly why it is valid and sound. But I mean, he's already done that for me, so why would I do that?
Yeah, I haven't seen that video, nor am I interested in.
I
So
highly
there's
suggest it.
no, I can't listen to that guy. Come on. So why? So explain to me. You're saying humans are of moral value, right?
Humans are of moral value
Yeah, we both agreed that they are, right?
if they are sentient. If they are sentient, sure.
If they are sentient.
Well, yeah. If a human's not sentient, why would anybody value them?
But that's your
So
own subjective moral system. I don't have to hold that position, do I?
yeah, of course not. Of course not. So I just want to try to get back on track here, because you
Mhm.
think that argument is invalid. And if that's what you want to go through, we can go through the actually formalized version, or we can just have a regular discussion and talk about what trait you think is lacking in animals that makes it justified.
Yeah, but I'm saying that the version that ask yourself whatever he did, I'm not interested in that version because that's not the version how the argument was presented. Okay, uh, and I'm not familiar with the other version. The version I'm familiar with is that humans are of moral value, and if we can stick to that, then I don't see what the problem is. I'm not really, dude. I'm not interested in all that other stuff you said because it just doesn't make any sense.
Well, I just don't want to use the informal version because it's informal.
Because
I
you
mean,
can't win.
no, I mean, if I want to win, we can just actually have a conversation and see exactly what trait is lacking in an animal that if we're lacking in humans
Right. So
would
if
make
I
it
say
more than just.
intelligence, so sorry.
Well, what is your, no, you're fine, you're fine. What is your actual trait though?
Well, I want to explain to you why name the trait doesn't work by using intelligence, right?
I mean, sure, go for it.
Right. So we agree that humans are of moral value. And then if I name intelligence, you're telling me, well, then I should be morally okay with killing stupid people, basically, right? People that don't have the trait intelligence, right? And I'm telling you, no, I'm not okay with that because we both agreed that humans are of moral value. So something is broken here.
Yeah, that's because you're using the informal version. I don't know why we keep going back to this. I
Well,
mean,
because the video that I saw from you was using the informal version. So why can't we use the informal version that you used in your video?
because it's informal and it's not necessarily valid like these, like the one I have right in front of me. It is valid, it is sound. So if you want to use a formalized version of name the trait, we can do that, but I'm not going to use an informal version for an actual a discussion and pretend like it is valid and sound from premise to conclusion. I'm not just going to pretend that that's the case. If you want,
So you're yeah, but the hold on, but the argument is presented in the way it's presented. Yeah, humans are of moral value, and so on and so forth. That is the argument. That's the way the argument you presented on your channel. That's the way this argument has always been presented. That's the way it is presented on Wikipedia or whatever. This is the argument. So why can't you use this version?
I already explained why, because it's for people that aren't necessarily into philosophy, just to
Okay,
kind of
I'm not into
gist of it.
philosophy then. I'm not into philosophy. Neither is anybody in um
Okay, well, then let's just have a conversation. Why do we need to have premises and a conclusion if we're not even going to use a formalized version of an argument? That doesn't make sense.
well, then how come you didn't deploy the formalized version of the argument in your videos?
I already explained why, because people, they would get lost in the words for the most part because they don't read philosophy. I'm
Mhm.
not even a huge philosophy head. That's why I don't make long form videos like Ask Yourself does. That's not my forte.
Mhm.
So
Okay, so
go ahead. I
so
just want to.
you're saying humans are of moral value because you have a justification for why humans are of moral value, right?
I would say humans have moral value because they are sentient.
Right. But if I don't agree with that, if my explanation is different, then we don't agree on the first premise, do we?
Well, once again, what premise? The informal version? I don't want to. Why would we use that if it's informal?
I've already
That-
explained
We
that.
just, right. We just keep going back to this. We're going in circles. So we can either have a discussion about the formalized version of the argument, or
Yeah,
we
but I'm
can.
not familiar with the formalized version of the argument. I've never had taken a look at it. So, and
That's
I don't
fine.
think it's fair for you to just like drop that on me out of nowhere and act like it's legit when I'd like to have some time to look at it and think about it.
Absolutely.
I've never heard his version before. So your contention is that humans are of moral value because they're sentient.
That's why I deem humans as having moral value because they are sentient.
Well, then your first premise, then the whole thing is a paradox. It uses a false premise.
Because it's not the formal version. Man. Oh my god. Okay, so I don't think this is like going anywhere. We're just going in circles because you came to this debate thinking I'm going to use the informal version,
And
but
why would I
I,
think? Why would I think otherwise?
why? Well, that's fine if you did think that, but I don't blame you for thinking that. That's
Well,
what I had in my video.
this is how you presented the argument in your video, isn't it?
Right, exactly, and I already
Well,
explained
then
why I
why
did
would I?
it.
Right, but then why would I expect anything else than how you presented the argument? Why would I? All of it, you're changing. You're basically changing the argument all of a sudden.
No, I'm not changing the argument. Just because I use the informal version in my video doesn't mean I'm changing the argument. The
Okay,
argument. Go ahead.
well, my contention is that if you're saying humans are of moral value because they're sentient, you're not actually saying that humans are of moral value. You're not saying that. You're saying something completely different.
Kind of, yes. That sentience is what I have as my, I guess you could call it, moral axiom.
Right, but you're not. But all humans aren't sentient, right?
Sure.
Right. So you can't say
Like
human.
a fetus. Like that's why when it comes to abortion, up to a certain point, I'd see that as something morally neutral because they're not sentient.
What about a human in a coma?
Well, they have background desires, so they still have sentience. They
What
just
about a
aren't
dead human?
a dead human. Well, that yeah, that's so they're not sentient. I wouldn't say it would be morally wrong to do something with them, but you at the same time they are somebody's in the same sense. I saw you talk to Vegan Gains about this, like about the I don't know the name of the I don't know if it's a disease, anencephaly, something like that.
Hmm.
So that would just be a case of that person has value to somebody else, and they would basically be like property to that person. So it would be wrong to eat that person against the wishes of that person's family members.
But if that
They
family member, wants to murder that child and eat it, they can because it's their property. That's what you're saying.
murder that child. I thought they were already dead.
No, anencephaly kids are alive. They're just not sentient. They're non-sentient humans. If you're saying that what gives humans value is their sentience, you're saying that kids born with anencephaly don't have any value.
Right. They don't have moral value. They
Right.
may
So
have some sort of extrinsic value to the uh, people that are related to that child.
right, but what you're saying is that those people that own that child, as you put it, it's okay for them to murder and eat that child.
I may think it's gross.
But you think it's morally acceptable.
I don't know if acceptable is the right word. It's morally neutral. So can we get back on track with the
No,
actual
we're
argument?
good. We're actually good because you said that if I say intelligence is the trait, right, then eating dumb people should be morally acceptable. But if I say that it is, then I lose, right?
Hold on, say it again.
Like if I were to use the trait intelligence, right, then that means it's okay. I believe that it is okay to murder and eat unintelligent people. And by the standard, as you said it, and I agreed to it, that means I lose because you call it absurd, even though it isn't absurd because it's completely and utterly possible. But because most people would disagree, that was the condition with this being morally okay, that means that I lose. Yeah.
I think I'm following you. Sure.
If I use the trait intelligence once again, right? You
Right.
and in order for me to remain logically consistent, I have to agree it's okay to murder and eat unintelligent people. Yeah.
Yes, that would logically follow that
Right, but then
if your
you
intelligence is
also
a
say
trait.
then you also say that if I remain logically consistent in saying what I just said, that still means that I lose because most people would disagree because it's just insane to think this, right? That means that I lose
Yes,
the
it would be
debate.
morally absurd according to most people's moral system.
Right.
So,
Do you think most people would be okay with murdering and eating kids born with anencephaly?
well, that's the thing. I'm not saying it's. I'm not saying that people should do that.
I'm not saying you
Can
that
we
didn't
can we
answer.
try to get can we
No,
try to
that
get
didn't
back on track
you didn't
because
answer
this
my
is
question.
going out
You didn't
left
answer my
field.
question. You didn't answer
No,
my question.
I did answer your question. I just
So
want to get back to the whole point of this debate. So the point of this debate was for the meat eater to name the trait that makes it okay to kill animals and eat them for food, and if that same trait was applied to a human, that they would either bite the bullet on that, or they would not accept that trait and be logically inconsistent. So you haven't even named a trait at this point. I'm not sure how
But I'm
far
telling you
along we
why.
are.
But I'm telling you.
But I just want an answer. What is the trait to that?
No.
What is your trait? Can
I'm
we just
telling
like
you.
get
Yeah,
back
but
to
I'm
this debate
telling you. No, I'm telling you, and I think you just
so
lost
we
the debate.
can?
Actually, I think you actually just lost the debate. Because you're not willing to live up to the standard you say I should live up to, right? I told you the reason why we're talking about this is because I'm saying name the trait is invalid. And I'm trying to demonstrate to you why it's invalid. And you're saying, no. Let's go back to what we were just talking about instead of, but I want you to prove to me that it's valid. If you're going to put me to the test, why can't I put you to the test? Why is that wrong?
No, I'm not saying it's wrong. I just want to stick to the actual point of the debate, which is actually naming the trait that makes it okay to kill humans. Or
Right.
not kill humans, excuse
But
me.
I told you name the trait is invalid, right? And you told me to prove to you why it's invalid. Yes.
I never said for you to. We haven't even talked about the formalized version of the argument. So how could you prove that the argument isn't valid? You said yourself you haven't even seen the formalized version.
I already addressed why we're now talking about this other version of how you change the argument to be something that it isn't.
Change the argument. That's just the argument I used in my video.
You,
That's not changing the argument. The argument's always been there.
That's not the way you presented the argument. So I think we have to stick to how the argument is presented, rather than drop this like different version of the argument. Whatever you want to call it, it's no longer how it was presented. Is that correct?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm sure Ask Yourself would love to talk about the formalized version with you.
I'm not interested. I'm not in. We're not talking about anyone else. It's just you
that's
and
fine.
I.
But you don't want to talk about the formalized version, right?
And I already explained why.
Right now.
Okay, so once again, if I lose by naming whatever this other version is completely irrelevant, because you said that if I agree that if I say that it's okay to which I never did, by the way, it was all hypothetical. You agreed that if I say it's okay to kill and eat dumb people, then I lose the debate because most people would disagree with that. And then you also agreed that you ought to be logically consistent throughout the debate because that is what you expect me to be. You agreed to that as well. Thus, when I asked you why humans are of moral value, and you named the trait sentient, right? They are of moral value because they're sentient. What that also means is that non-sentient human beings are not of moral value. Thus, what that logically, using name the trait, what that leads to is you saying that it's morally okay to eat kids born with anencephaly, non-sentient human beings, right? And if most
I don't know if I necessarily accept that.
So it's not. So wait, is it okay or is it not okay to eat kids born with anencephaly?
I'm not sure.
But you're saying
because people, you got to take into account the people around them, and if we were to establish that role in society, I'm not sure that would bring about good consequences. So I'm not sure if I'd necessarily accept that.
Right, but I already addressed that point, saying that what if the people that, as you put it, own this child decide that it's to kill and murder and eat that child? You'd have to, in order for you to be logically consistent, you have to say that that's okay.
Not necessarily.
Why not?
Because like I said, if it does cause some sort of bad consequences to happen in society, I'm not sure if I necessarily accept that, because you got to take into account the well-being of the people around that person and in society in general. It's not just, it's not a, it's I'm not sure how to put it. It's not a,
but I could give you the same answer. I could say, well, it's not okay to eat dumb people because it will cause negative repercussions in society. So I say the same thing. So how do I could just say intelligence then, and I win the debate.
How would you win the debate? I don't
understand.
Well,
I'm using the same justifications you are using right now. You're trying to wiggle out of something that you wouldn't let me wiggle out of.
Nobody's trying to wiggle out of anything. I'm just trying to figure out, because the whole point of this debate was to talk about name the trait.
We are talking about name the trait.
Right. And you still haven't named any sort of trait that
but we were over
that if we're absent in an animal. No, you still have name the trait. Then that's
But I
all I'm
told you
waiting
why.
for.
But I told you why I did name the trait, right?
You told me why, but have you named your actual trait? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, but the reason why I told you I don't need to name the trait is because name the
because you're
trait isn't.
using the informal version, right?
No, because name the trait is invalid.
We haven't even talked about the formalized version. If you want to, we can. Or if you want to come back to it, like I said,
But
I'm sure.
I already addressed that. Are you not okay with me addressing what I had to say about that? You think it's so you actually think it's okay for you to present the argument as I presented it in this debate in your videos and say that you want to debate this with people as you presented it, and then
I
you're
didn't
gonna
say as I presented it. When did I say that?
you presented the argument and then you said you wanted to debate the argument that you
Right.
presented. But this is how you presented the argument, isn't it?
I didn't say I wanted to debate this specific informalized version of the argument. If you want to talk about the actually formalized version of the
No,
argument, we can do
I
that.
already
I
addressed this.
don't know. This
I
is
want to
so
talk
off
about.
topic. I don't want to. I don't want to talk about like this is like you and you're asking yourself with the whole meta thing. Like I don't want to do that. I just want to get straight to the point and for you to name a trait that would justify killing animals and not humans. Can you do that? Can you name a trait for me and not
Right. And
some?
what I asked you is I don't have to name the trait because you can't name the trait that's going to justify eating plants and not animals or human beings. You can't name that trait either. So why should I have to go by this certain standard that you yourself are not unwilling to live up to? That's what I'm saying.
I mean, I can name the trait as well, but I'm just asking you to. I've already named my trait. I'm asking you to name a trait.
Right.
Can you do that?
The trait that you named
No,
using
no. Can you do that? Can you name a trait?
I can, but what I'm saying is that,
Will you? Can you do it right now?
well, I don't want to because I think you already
Then what's the point of this discussion? What
because you lost the debate.
When did I lose the debate? You still haven't named a trait.
Neither did you name the trait.
I did name the trait. I
Okay,
already named my trait. Can you name your trait now so we can talk about your moral system? What is the trait that
why don't you want to talk about your moral system?
I already have. We already have. That's why I'm asking you. Can we get some sort of trait out of you? Is that possible?
Yeah, but what I'm saying to you is that when I name the trait, you're going to try to put me to the same test that you yourself just failed.
I don't understand what you're talking about. What test did I fail?
Okay, so if I were to once again,
okay, hold on. Let's run through this one more time. I will name the trait. I will give you that. I will gladly run through my trait with you, and we can do that real fast. And then, will you name a trait for me?
Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But
okay, then no. There's no point to this. If you're not going to name a trait,
like, let me tell you why. But let me tell you why. Because if you name the trait and you fail, right? You prove to be logically inconsistent or absurd as you defined it. Then I don't have to name the trait because you just lost the debate.
No, man. I'm sorry. Can we please just stick to the topic?
We are sticking to
this. Is frustrating.
So tell me where I've gone wrong. Okay, let me recap this so you can tell me where I've gone wrong.
Here we go. Let's do it. Let the memes begin if they haven't already. Go for it.
So again, if I name intelligence, that means I have to be okay with.
Why are we talking about intelligence? That's not your actual trait. So what's
because I want to present what the rules for winning or losing the game are, right? Just by giving an example.
But we already know the rules of the debate.
Right. And you're unwilling, and now you're skirting the rules because you cannot pass the game as you expect me to, right? Because once again, what's the difference? Tell me this. What is the difference between me hypothetically saying that it's okay to kill and eat dumb people versus you saying that it's okay to kill and eat kids born with anencephaly?
We've already discussed this. I don't know if I necessarily accept that. That's basically my answer right there. I don't know because there are other factors that go into that.
Okay, well then I can say the same thing. I don't know if I accept that because there are other factors that go into that, right?
Okay, sure. So can we name your trait, please?
Well,
what is your trait?
But if I say, I don't know if I accept that because there are other conditions there, then what? Did I just
I already gave you the other conditions though.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is that you don't believe humans are of moral value. This is what it sounds like to me. You believe that only sentient humans, or more broadly speaking, sentient beings are of moral value. That is your premise. This is why name the trait is a paradox that contains a false premise. Because when you're saying humans are of moral value, what that implies
That's
is
not the
that,
premise. That's the informal version.
look, I already addressed this. Like, what is
I
wrong with
know we have multiple times.
what's
That's
wrong with
why
the
I don't
informal
see.
version?
Because it's informal. That's why we shouldn't use it. If you want to use the formalized version for the
Yeah, but
umpteenth
when
time, we
you
can.
when you made your video, you didn't say this is the informal version of the argument, did you?
I don't remember. It's been a while since
No,
I
you
made that
didn't.
video.
You didn't, because if there's another version, you should have presented it. You didn't present it. You didn't give us a link to where this other version is. I'm talking about the
Well, it's
version
on
of
my stream right now if anybody wants to look at the formalized version. If you want to come over, my name's Brandon Mize, M-I-Z-E. Come over, look at the formalized version.
so you can't justify veganism with name the trait, can you?
It's not about justifying veganism. It's just a filter to test your the consistency of your moral system. That's all
Right.
it does.
So
It's not
that's
saying
what
you
I'm saying.
should be vegan.
But what I'm saying is,
Unless
but that's exactly what I'm saying. Your subjective moral system that, as you define it, leads to veganism. Uh,
it doesn't lead
you
to veganism.
Well, but it justifies
Wait.
veganism.
I see what you're
But
saying. I'm sorry.
it
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're right. Under my moral system,
it's okay to eat
using name the
plants,
trait, it would lead to veganism. You're right. I'm sorry.
right? But then you're saying the sentience is the trait, yeah, right?
Right. So
So
what's your trait?
yeah, but I'm saying I need you to
My
concede
man,
something
come
before we
on.
move.
I've seen you do this with vegan gains and ask yourself and a few other people like why do you have to dodge? Just like be
That's
honest.
not
What
an
is your
argument.
trait?
You're the one who's dodging.
We've already talked
But
about my moral system. I allowed you to do that. I came into this debate like dead set on not letting you obfuscate the conversation, and I even let you do that to an extent. And I don't know why I did that, but can we just get back to the
I'm not
actual
I'm not obfuscating the conversation. I'm putting you to the moral standard to this
and
name that trait. I'm asking you to pass
and
the
we've already
trait.
done that.
I'm
We've
asking,
already done that. Can you please name a trait? Please.
but your trait failed. Why should
You
I
can
name the
say it failed, but can we name your trait now?
so your trait being
We'll
sentient?
leave that up. We'll
Hold
leave
on,
that
no,
up
no,
to the
no,
audience.
no, 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 no. We need to be logical and intellectually honest here. If if
I
if
agree.
if sentience is your trait, then where do we stand insofar as murdering kids born with anencephaly, or eating dead human beings? Where do we stand as far as that goes? You have to say that that's morally permissible, right? Otherwise, you have a logical contradiction.
I see exactly why Ask Yourself was trying to
That's not an
stay
argument.
away from the meta.
That's
I'm not saying it is. Like I said, there are different factors that go into that, like social contracts and that sort of thing. So,
but I already had a
hold on,
but I
hold
already
on.
had a
I got
response
your
to that.
answer for you. I got your answer for
But
you.
I had a
So,
response
in a
to this.
vacuum, that may be morally neutral. Does that answer your question?
In a vacuum, but we're not talking about a
Right.
vacuum.
Without in.
We're
Right.
talking about real life society, right? We're talking about what's
Okay.
real. We're
Then
not talking about vacuums. We're not talking about universe boxes here. We're talking about reality. My subjective, and you have to respect this, my subjective ethical system doesn't deal with vacuums
I have no
or
clue what your subjective system is at this point. You haven't named any sort of trait. You haven't told me what you value. You haven't told me anything. We've just been discussing my moral system. You already know the vegan moral system. I don't know why we have to go
right.
through this
So
over
the
and over again. So,
so
can
the
you
vegan so the
please, God, name a trait for me?
yeah, but you already lost the debate, dude.
You can say that. That's fine. That's
Well, then
fine. You can
no,
say
I
that.
can.
We'll have the vegans and the carnists decide whatever they want. I just want some sort of answer out of you. What is the
Yeah, but I
trait
haven't I
that
haven't
makes it
gotten an
okay to
answer
kill
from you.
animals but not humans?
But I haven't gotten an answer from you.
You have multiple times. We've been over it and over it and over it. Can you please
Okay.
name a trait?
So once again, where do you stand
Can
on?
you? I already gave you the answer. Can you please name
So
a trait?
what's the answer? Because I don't accept your answer.
I already. You can go back and watch it.
You
Can you
moved
please name a trait?
you moved the goalposts, right?
Nobody's moving the goalpost. Can you please just name the trait for me?
Are you seriously going to do a vegan gains and say answer the question, answer the question, answer the?
I may have to. I see exactly why you did it.
Yeah, but you're not answering any of my questions.
I answered multiple questions of yours. You haven't answered this one simple question. What is the trait that makes it okay to kill animals but not humans? What is that trait?
But what's the trait that makes it okay to eat plants and not animals?
We've already been through that. Can you please
Right,
answer my
right,
question?
right. So, but why are you rejecting the
Why are
stand?
you dodging?
No, because you dodged the answer. You're all of a sudden you're
We've
saying,
been
okay. So if
we can
I say intelligence. So hypothetically speaking, I say intelligence. Let's go through this again, and then I say, so you're asking me to eat retarded kids or something, right? And or that accept that it's morally okay to do that, and I give the same answer that you gave, right? And I say, well, that would
Is this
depend
your
on.
actual trait?
No, I'm speaking hypothetically right now. If I say
Well then
intelligence, yeah.
why?
Well,
We've already been through this. Can you just
well,
name your
okay.
trait?
So, well, hold on. I'm giving you an answer. If I name intelligence, yeah, and we get to you saying
You're
that
not giving me an answer if that's not your trait, man.
can I finish?
Sure, go for it. We've already been
Tell
through
me,
this. I don't
but
know
tell
why
me if
we have to.
okay, but tell me if you accept this answer. Okay, that's what I'm saying. And if I say intelligence, and then you say, well, then you have to be okay with eating mentally retarded kids or something like that, right? And I say, well, I wouldn't be okay with that because those kids have parents and universe boxes and things in a vacuum. Is that an acceptable answer?
I'm not sure what that has to do with anything. Can you please
But
just
that's
actually name your trait?
so. So
I'm
when
trying to
I
be calm here. Can you just
so
be can you
when
just
I
be honest with me and tell me your trait?
but so why can't you answer the question? Because look,
Because
when
we've already been through
yeah,
that.
but
We've
hold
been
on, hold
through
on,
it.
but hold on. If if you get me in a certain corner, right, and this is the answer that I give you. If I give you the same answer that you gave me when I put you in that same corner, why aren't you accepting it?
Accepting what?
Well, I'm gonna say it's not okay to eat those kids, right?
Okay.
Remaining.
Okay. Why? Okay. What?
Well,
So
then I
no,
give
no,
the
no, no,
same
no.
reason that you
Or
gave. I
well,
give the
no,
same
no, no.
reason that you gave.
Well, can we actually name your trait and we'll see if you fall into that pit? Can we do
Let's
that?
say,
What is your trait?
hypothetically, this is a hypothetical example. Hypothetically, my trait is intelligence.
No, I don't want to talk about hypotheticals. I want to talk about your
Why
moral
not?
system.
What's wrong with hypotheticals?
Because we've been through this whole thing. Can you please just name your trait?
So you reject hypotheticals.
No, I'm
You
not
don't.
rejecting hypotheticals. I just want to get back to your moral system. I want to talk about your moral system. I don't want to talk about hypothetical moral systems.
But you don't want to talk about your moral system.
We already have. That's the thing. Anybody can go back and watch. We've already talked about my moral system and
So
what it.
okay, so I say intelligence is the trait, right?
No, that's not your. Is that your actual trait? Because I don't think it is. I've seen your videos, bro. Just say your name. Just say your trait.
Intelligence.
No, you're lying. I've seen your videos. It's not intelligence.
Well, I could try that trait, right? And if that one doesn't work, I get to try another one, right?
No, you can just name your trait. That'd work.
Why can't I just rattle off multiple traits and see if any of them stick?
I mean, you can, but I want to
Okay, well
talk about your moral system.
let's start with intelligence then.
No. Can we just name your trait? We already been
Okay,
through
so
the whole intelligence
you're
thing.
asking me to name the trait, yes?
Your trait, yes, not a hypothetical
Right.
trait that you want
And
to throw out there.
I'm naming intelligence. Are you accepting or rejecting that trait?
Is that your actual trait? Not
That's the
hypothetically.
that's the trait I'm naming right now.
Is that your actual trait?
Right now it is.
So it's not. So it's not actually what your moral system is based on.
Well, I mean, my moral system isn't based on name the trait.
Oh, I didn't. It doesn't have to be based on name the trait. I'm talking about your base axiom that you base your moral system on. What is that? Is what is that?
You asked me to name the trait, and I name intelligence.
That's not your trait, though. Can you name your trait? What is your trait? I don't know why this is so difficult.
I don't know why it's so difficult. Why can't I say intelligence?
Because that's not your actual trait, man. I've seen your videos.
So I'm giving you the trait, you're rejecting it. Is that correct?
I'm rejecting your fake trait. That's not your actual trait. So yes.
Yeah, but it's my trait.
It's not your trait. It's the one you're naming. It's not your
Yeah,
actual
it's the
trait
name.
that you
Okay,
base your
yeah.
system off of.
Why can't I name intelligence? Why am I not allowed to change my mind?
Uh, you of course you can change your mind anytime you want,
Okay, so
but
I
this is
changed my
not
mind.
your actual system. This
So
is
I
not your moral system.
so I changed my mind and I named the trait. Do you reject name the trait after you asked me to name the trait?
I'm not rejecting name the trait. I'm
Okay, well
rejecting your
let's play the game.
hypothetical trait.
Okay, let's play
I
the
don't want to
game
play the game. I want to talk about your moral
because
system.
you can win the game.
It's not a game. It's just talking about our moral systems. Like I don't know why it's so hard. Just name your actual trait.
Human.
Human. Thank you. Oh, my man. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. So now we're actually going to get into this. Awesome. So if and I'm just going to be you already know this hypothetical I'm going to raise. But actually, I'm not even going to raise that one. I'm going to make one up on the spot. So if we were to well, human, is it based on the DNA? I just want to get a definition real quick.
Human.
Human. So you're not going to define human?
I get to define human.
Right. That's what I'm asking you to do.
Well, when we get to a juncture where we debate whether whatever the hell it is you think you're going to create is human or not, ultimately it's going to be up to me to determine whether or not that's human because you believe morality is subjective.
Okay. So you're just going to change your definition depending on my answer.
No, my definition is
Okay.
human. You don't know
Right.
what
Well,
do you
that's
not
not a
know?
definition. That's a word.
Do you know what human is?
I can give you my definition of human, but we're not talking about my definition. So if you want to say your trait is human, I'm just going to assume you mean the DNA structure. So if we were
No,
to,
human is a
it's
lot more
not.
than that. It's a lot more
Okay,
than that. Human. It has to be human. We all know what human is. Like, do you honestly think that we could look at something in this world and then decide whether, and there would be a dispute whether or not that thing is human? Do you think such a thing exists?
well, yes, most people think that when they say human, they're talking about Homo sapien. They're talking about a specific, um, basically DNA in an animal. That's what they're referring to. So that's why I was throwing out DNA.
No, but my trait's not DNA. My trait is human.
Right. So can you define that for me?
Not sure I can.
You can't define human. Okay. Well, like I said, okay, I'll just go
A
through
human is a
the
human.
good old alien
Hold on,
analogy. Can we
let me
do
hold
that?
on. A human is a human, right? Like, what is there to define?
That's a tautology. That's just that. No,
Well, but
that's
do you not?
tautological.
Okay, right. It is. Do you not know what a human is?
Yes, I do, and I just told you what I think most people mean by human. So, um,
Well,
so if an alien,
if we get to a point where there's a dispute as to what human is, then we could debate that then. But human is what I say human is, right? Because morality is subjective.
sure. So,
Okay.
I'll throw out the old alien analogy. If aliens were to come down and farm us for food, would they be ethically justified to do so just because they're not of the same species?
My subjective, as you put it, ethical system rejects these hypothetical. It's not even hypothetical because you have to prove to me that that aliens exist. I don't think aliens exist. I mean, maybe they do.
No,
Do you have any evidence of these aliens
I'm not
existing?
claiming aliens actually exist. I'm claiming if they did exist and they came down to farm animals for or farm people for food, would they be ethically justified in doing so?
Well, right. But what I'm telling you is that my ethical system, which you perceive as subjective, uh, is not concerned with these things. It doesn't matter to me. Like it's not how I determine what's ethical, right? Because you believe it's subjective.
I'm asking what in your own ethical system, would that be ethical for the aliens to do that just because they're of a different species?
I mean, I don't think it's unethical for a lion to kill a human being. So why would I care if why would I say it's unethical for aliens to do that? Why would I say that?
Okay, so you're saying that it would be morally acceptable for an alien race to come
No,
down
I
and
would say
holocaust us all for
I would
food
say it's
because they're of a
neutral.
different species.
No, I would say it's neutral.
Okay, so but it would be okay because they are of a different species. They would be justified in doing so because it is
No,
morally
I didn't
neutral.
say that. I didn't say it's because they're of a different species. I said that
Well, they're
I
not
didn't give
human.
And
Right. So it would
so
be okay.
it would be okay. Yeah, it would be okay, but I didn't tell you why.
Okay. Okay. So I'll throw out the other analogy I was going to use, since it sounds like you would just bite the bullet on the aliens holocausting us all. Um, if we were to change, let's say, if we were to change your DNA structure, but everything else was the same, you look the same, you think the same, would it be morally justified to kill you because you wouldn't be a member of the human species according to your DNA anymore?
Okay, so my trait is human, yeah? If it's not human, it's okay to kill it. If it is human, it's not okay to kill it. It's really that simple. I don't understand like what it
Right,
is.
and I'm changing the DNA of you to where you're not human anymore.
And I'm
And let's say not
answering
to,
and I'm answering to
so you're
you
not.
and I'm answering your question. If it's not human, it's not unethical. If it is
That's why we
human,
need to
it
define
is.
what you mean by human, because I take it as most people do. What you mean by human is a Homo sapien with that specific kind of DNA.
It really doesn't matter. The answer is if it's human, yeah,
Can
then
you
it's not okay. Well, you
can you
could
define that?
can I define? I think if you change my DNA, I would die.
Well, is that what makes you human though? Is the DNA what makes you human?
No, being a human is what makes you a human.
That's a tautology. That's not answering the question. What makes you can you just define human for me? It's I mean, most people would just be able to say, okay, this is what I mean by human. Can you do that?
Well, a human is a whole bunch of different things. It definitely has something to do with the
Okay,
DNA, but it also has to do with the spirit. It has to do with the soul. It has to do with what everybody else perceives as, whether or not it has to do with like the contract, social contract that we agree that this is or isn't human. Look, the answer
okay,
is very simple. The answer is
go
very
one by
simple.
one with those.
The answer is very simple. If it is human, okay, you're gonna have to take this or leave it. If it is human, it's not okay to kill it because the trait is human. If it's not human, however, whatever definition that I agree to, fine. If it's not human, then it's not okay to kill it. Then it
Okay,
is okay to kill it. If it is human, then it isn't.
right. So you named excuse me, I just burped. Okay. So you just named a few different characteristics of what it takes to be a human, and we can run through those one by one. So would you accept the DNA one, since that is something that makes us human, at least a part of it? Would you accept that? Killing you because we change your DNA structure? You wouldn't be a part of the human species anymore because we changed your DNA.
What does this have to do with eating animals or any like this is so irrelevant
Because
to the conversation.
no, it's not, because we're talking about your trait, which is human, and
Yeah,
you
it's
just
human.
you loosely defined human. So we're just going to take the characteristics that you described that make a human, and we can take them one by one. That's why I started off with
You
DNA, and then
can't
we can
take
move
them
on
one
to
by
the
one.
next
You
one.
can't take them one by one because it's a package deal.
Okay, so if we were to take a human um, and take all of the characteristics that you said away from that human, it would be justified to kill whatever that thing is.
If right, you said thing. So if you take you're taking humanity out of the human, basically, right?
Well, that's why I was trying to like define human, because I'm still here. Let me get my notepad out. You said DNA is definitely one. What are the other characteristics that makes us human?
Do you not know what a human is?
Yes, of course.
Okay, and I think we agree on what human is. Yeah, we can
Yes,
just
a
we can
Homo sapien with a specific kind of DNA.
we can
That
just look at it, and we don't have to look at the DNA. We don't have to do. We could just look at it, and we know if it's a human or not. No.
I mean, we can, but we're trying to differentiate about the specific properties. And like I said, we can take them one by one to see if
No,
you
we
would
can't.
accept the
We can't
consequences
because it's a
of the
package
argument.
deal. We can't take them one by one because human is the
Well, can we
entire.
just? That's fine. That's fine. Can we just take? Can we just like get a list of the characteristics that make us human? Because, like I said, I don't know how you define it.
I already answered your question. Like, I really don't feel like going down this road because it just doesn't make any sense to me. You know, if it's not human, Okay, this is my answer to you. If it's not human, if it doesn't possess the trait human, it's okay to kill it. If it does possess the trait human, it's not okay to kill it. Why
Well,
is
that's right.
why is that not a sufficient answer?
Because we need to figure out what you mean by human and what properties that human
Okay,
possesses.
well then show me this thing that you're going to create, and I'll tell you if it's human or not.
Well, I tried to with the DNA example,
Okay,
and you
what's
said
go
that
ahead,
was
go
still
ahead.
human.
What's the DNA example?
Okay, so if we were to take a human, change its DNA structure, but it looked the same, it thought the same, everything else was the same except for the DNA structure, would it be okay to kill that?
Yeah, my answer to you is if it's human, then it's not okay. If it isn't human, then it is okay. Now, if you can
So would
actually,
it be
oh, hold
okay
on,
to
I'm not
kill?
done. I'm not done. So if you could
Uh,
create this thing and present it to me, whatever you think that thing is, I'll give you my answer. I'll tell you if it is or isn't human.
Right, right. So the example I just gave, would you consider that human?
What?
A being that had it was the exact same in every way. It looked the same, it thought just like a human, had the same brain structure as a human, but the only thing that was different was the DNA structure. Would it be okay to kill that being?
You just created an
It's a
impossible.
hypothetical.
No, no, no. It's absurd. This thing doesn't exist. You just imagine that it does exist. Unless you could show to me how it's possible to create this thing, it's not a hypothetical. You just reduce your own position to absurdity. It's like saying,
No, not at
yes,
all.
hold on.
People
It's
use hypotheticals all
hold
the
on.
time.
Yes, hypotheticals like
Right.
something that could actually happen in the real world. That's possible. A hypothetical cannot be absurd, right? You do know this, right?
Sure, but I mean, gene splicing is a real thing, so I'm not sure. It's not like
Okay,
out of
so
this world to imagine something like that.
yeah, but my ethical, like, I don't concern myself with these things. I reject this because to me this is absurd. I don't think unless you could prove to me that whatever this thing it is that you created exists, I reject it as absurd.
Okay, so you're not going to entertain the hypothetical because I would have to present to you
Because
a
it's not a
being that
hypothetical.
actually has the
No, no,
characteristics
no,
what
no.
I
You
just
have to
described.
present me. You have to present me with the science or something that suggests that this is possible. It's not possible. This is you just made this shit up. This doesn't exist. And moreover, whatever this creature is that you created has zero bearing on ethics or morality because it's absurd. It's not real. My ethical system is not concerned, and you believe it's fine because my ethical system, according to you, is subjective. Thus, you cannot impose your own rules on my
Yeah, and
ethical
I'm not
system.
trying to. Right,
Right,
right. I'm not
and I'm
trying to
telling
impose
you,
my
I'm
values on
telling
yours.
you,
You're right.
I'm
So,
telling you, which is why I'm telling you that I reject this BS because it's absurd. So unless you
you
could
can
unless you
you
could
can
somehow prove or demonstrate that this thing that you're saying is able to exist, and unless you could actually prove that this is possible, it's not even a hypothetical. It's absurd.
I don't think I have to do that. People I mean any first year philosophy student would be laughing right now.
That's not an
Hypotheticals, all
argument.
they do, you're right,
That's
it's
not an
not. All,
argument.
all it does is like we've talked about before, all this does is test the consistency of your moral system. That's all it does. You can
Right.
say it's impossible. You can say
My
it,
moral system. My moral
oh,
system.
I don't know how you would demonstrate it's impossible, but you can say I have to demonstrate it's possible, but I don't think I have to. It's just a hypothetical.
It's not a hypothetical. It's absurd. A hypothetical
It
has to
is.
be possible.
And who says
It's just.
who are you saying it's impossible? Because that's a claim you're making. You would have to
Do
prove
you
that.
think? Do you
I'm
think
not
it's? Do you think it's possible for elephants to fly? You
do I think
flapping
it's
their wings like an elephant flapping their wings.
flapping their ears.
Ears, yeah. Is it possible for them to fly?
As of right now, no. But we
So how
can
is that a
use a
hypothetical?
hypothetical. We can use a hypothetical to make ears be able to, or elephants be able to fly by their big ears. It doesn't make it a an absurd or
It
insane
is
or whatever
absurd.
you want to call.
It is
It's still a
absurd.
hypothetical.
No,
It's
it's
just a
absurd.
hypothetical.
It's absurd.
Okay, so you're not going to entertain the hypothetical because you don't
Well,
believe that
I'll
it's possible.
entertain a hypothetical, like let's say I'm walking down the street and a cow crosses the road. Is it okay to eat or not eat that cow, or a desert island scenario, being stuck on an island with a couple of people and a monkey, and who would I rather eat? That's a hypothetical. I'll accept those. The stuff that you're coming up with is absurd.
So if I were to say something like a godlike being came down, a godlike species came down to Earth, and they were naive enough for some reason to make friends with us, and we start farming them for food, you wouldn't accept. And if we started farming them for food,
I'd be okay with
that
that.
would
I'd be
that
okay
would
with
be okay.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that.
Okay, so you would literally holocaust godlike beings just because they're not a part of the human species.
No, I wouldn't, but I would be okay with that.
Okay, so right. So you would accept killing Yeshua if him and his brothers, godlike brothers, came down and just wanted to be friends with us. We could just holocaust them into infinitum just because they're not a part of the human species. We could.
I wouldn't say it's unethical to do that.
All right. Well, that's okay. Well, there you go. I don't know what to say. I see, like, to me, that would be absurd. I would see that as
I don't.
terribly wrong. I would
It's
see that as
irrelevant. It's irrelevant what it means to you, because you're a moral subjectivist. So you cannot push your own, as you admitted, your own
right.
worldview onto me. You can't. So you're
Right,
just
and I'm right, and I'm not trying to, and I think most people would find that to be absurd.
most people disagree with you, I would say. And
Okay, this is like, there's no way to actually confirm what people would find morally absurd. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just my intuition to think that most people would think that holocausting godlike beings that came to Earth ad infinitum for food. I mean, that's just my opinion, I guess, that
okay,
most people would find that
okay,
morally
that's your
absurd.
opinion. Okay, and my opinion is that most people
Eh,
would not be. Oh, hold on. Most people would not be okay with murdering and eating kids born with anencephaly, right?
right, but I didn't necessarily accept that.
Well, then, if you don't accept that, then you have a logical contradiction, which is
How do I have a
what
contradiction?
well, because you said that what
If
gives.
you want, I can think about it a little more. I've never actually thought about that. My intuition would tell me that um, that I don't really know. It's kind of pulling me both ways. So I'm not, like I said, I'm not necessarily sure about that.
Yeah, but you wouldn't accept that answer from me, right? Because that doesn't get us anywhere. If I say, well, I'm not sure about that, which is what I was trying to do with
Right.
this non-human human that you tried to create. I said, well, I reject this because I can't give you an answer, right? But you kept pressing me, and I'm like, well,
Right.
I mean, the thing that you're saying exists. I don't think it does, and I gave you the best answer that I could, but you didn't accept that, right?
Right.
But I'm
So
supposed to accept a congruent or parallel answer from you, like, oh, I don't really know, kind of wishy-washy. I'm not really going to give you an answer because you're going to put me in a corner from which I can't get out of.
no, that's not necessarily why, because it's actually a good question. I'm not necessarily sure. If you want, I'd be more than happy to actually think about it and come back and talk to you. Because it's not that I don't want to be caught in a corner, because like that is a really good question that does test my moral system. So I'm not necessarily sure exactly what I think about that at the moment, but I'm sure that Ask Yourself would have a good answer to that if you want to talk to him about it. But as of right now, I honestly, I'm not sure.
So, I mean, I just don't understand how.
I'm just being honest with you, man. I honestly don't know
Well, then, but that's
what I
my
wouldn't. Go
yeah,
ahead.
but that's my point. Name the trait is bogus because you can't pass the test either. No one can. That's the point. because it's a paradox. And look, if you send me this informal version of the argument, maybe I'll find some time to look at this shit. Like, I'm not really that interested in it because it's I think it's just another trick that's going to take me a while to figure it out. But this is the argument as it was always presented. And look, whether you choose sentience, whether you choose intelligence, whether you choose human, you can although I don't necessarily agree with human, but if you say intelligence or sentience, you always find yourself in the same situation, no matter who you are or what you believe. So how am I incorrect and you are correct, or vice versa? Do you know what
How
I'm
are
trying
you?
to say?
Not
Well,
really. Can you
okay.
rephrase that? I'm sorry.
Once again, if I say intelligence, I'm stuck with saying it's okay eating dumb people. If you say sentience, you're stuck with saying it's okay to eat kids born with anencephaly, dead human beings, whatever. You're saying that that's okay, which again, most people would say it's not okay to eat dumb people or kids born with anencephaly, right? So we're in the same position. I don't see how
Right. We
my
both. I guess we would both have morally absurd positions. But like I said, I'm not sure if I would accept that. I would have to think about it more because I don't know the ins and outs of anencephaly, and also um, I'm not. Like I said, there's different things that would go into that. So yeah,
well the
I
definition
mean,
the
I guess we
definition of
both lose.
the definition of anencephaly is a child with no sentience. That's what anencephaly is. It's a human being that's non-sentient. So if you're saying sentience gives humans moral value, what you're actually saying is that those don't have any moral value. And if I'm saying it's intelligence, then that means dumb people don't have any moral value. But if I'm saying human, then anything that isn't human doesn't have any moral value, and everything that's human does. I don't think I.
Right. So, like I said, my intuition does want to accept that it would be gross and probably bad on society. It may be morally neutral about the anencephaly thing, and same thing goes for you um, when it goes to the whole human thing, because you would kill godlike beings if they came down
Do you?
for basically
But,
no reason.
but do you believe in God?
Of course not. No.
Well, then those things don't exist, do they?
But once again, it's a hypothetical.
Yeah,
And
but come on.
I'm not saying they're actually God. I'm just saying they're godlike. They can do things that would make it look like, from our point of view, are magic.
Yeah, but I'm talking about things in the real world. Your ethical system, wants to draw some kind of inference from things that, so far as we know, don't exist. So my ethical system is grounded in reality. Your ethical system is la la land.
Not necessarily. I mean,
Well,
we with the DNA example, that is possible. I don't see the problem with my
right.
DNA example. And
Okay,
same thing with
but
the alien example. That's not necessarily something that's
yeah,
impossible.
but with your DNA example, if this is possible, what you're saying, then what's going to happen at that point in time, if it is to happen, the definition of human is going to change, and we as a society, I believe, we're going to accept those people, whatever, as people, as human beings. So no, you can't murder them, right? It really depends on. Sorry,
The definition of human, right?
I'm getting some really bad feedback from you. Yeah, so that's why I'm like wishy-washy about it, because it's like, well, you're saying this thing is something, and to me it's like, well, look, if it's human, then obviously you can't kill it. So, and what's human? Well, I guess it is what we all agree that human is, or what I define as human. And that's still not a logical contradiction within my own system. But at the very least, my ethical system is based on things in the here and the now, real things. Your ethical system relies on these things that you say is possible for them to exist. Mine and veganism isn't about, some la la land scenario. It's about the here and the now. So my system applies. Yours is just hypothetical.
I mean, once again, not necessarily. There are other examples depending on the trait. So, and once again, I don't see why that matters, because people may not have a lockdown moral system, but certainly, depending on your values, some systems are better than other. Once again, depending on your values, and
Right.
that's all that matters to me.
But that depends on my values, right? Because you believe that's subjective. Look, for me, eating animals isn't even contained within the moral purview. It has nothing to do with ethics, whether you eat it. Feeding yourself cannot be moral or immoral, period. But I don't necessarily want to go down that route, because I know you're going to say that humans can survive on plants, and we're not going to agree on that. So there's no debate there, obviously.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
so I don't see how you could expect to put me to a test which you yourself cannot pass.
Well, I think I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by pass. I think I'm being consistent. Now, if we want to talk about the whole morally absurd thing, um, I, I don't know. It depends. We would need like empirical data for that. I'm not sure how we would go about proving that whole thing. That's why, um, um, it's I don't know. I don't know. It doesn't seem like that's uh, I'm not sure how to put it. It doesn't seem like that would be the um, be all end all. I mean, that is what we're deferring to, and people can pick and choose which moral system that they would prefer depending on what they think is more valuable. Whether, like you said, it's I'm not sure what your definition of human is at this point, or if they want to value sentience.
It's the
So,
same. It's the same as yours. Like just because I can't necessarily put it into because look, you're gonna get me with this gotcha. I'm gonna try to scramble for a definition and I'll forget some part of it, or you're gonna take my definition and break it into pieces and try to refute it piece by piece when well the human is the entirety. So I don't want to go down that road because I don't think that's valid or legitimate to take this human and you know I know how.
well, I would disagree, but if you don't want to go down that road, that's fine.
So, but this is what I don't understand. You know, if I am to remain logically consistent, even accepting your what I considered an impossible hypothetical, or at the very least absurd, um, I would be okay. I would, in order for me to be consistent, I would have to be okay with, you know, people killing godlike creatures or something simply because they're not human, which you can't even prove that they exist. But there's no evidence of these creatures. If you go down that same path,
I don't. Go ahead.
hold on, let me just finish. If I go down that same path with you, you'd have to be okay in order to be logically consistent with killing and eating human beings that actually exist in this world. So how is how is your, the way you conceptualize this whole name the trait thing, how is that any more valid when mine is based in reality and yours is based in a hypothesis?
Well, once again, it's not like mine is completely devoid of reality. I don't know why you keep saying that, but and it's and you can once again we both can have consistent moral systems, and I'm kind of losing my train of thought because I'm kind of tired at this point. But I'm not. I'm not sure why just because somebody wants to raise moral hypotheticals that makes one system better than the other. Why does that follow? That seems like a non sequitur.
Well, because ultimately philosophy is useless if it cannot be applied to reality, right? I mean, we could sit here and philosophize about, and I'm really not interested in that, about hypothetical scenarios all day and all night. But veganism is not a hypothetical thing, it's a real thing in the real world. So I think it makes sense to talk about the real world rather than something that may or may not come into existence.
Okay. Well, I would say that the veganism ethic is better for the world for not just these, not just for like name the trait reasons, but for other reasons as well, like environmental, health, and that sort of thing as well. So I would say overall, mine is more based in reality, but we didn't come here to talk about the environmental or the health reasons. So,
Yeah,
um,
I would completely disagree on all that. And if you want, we could have a debate, a scientific debate, talking about what's real and studies, if you want, and all that other stuff. Because you know, but we're not here for that. So whatever. We simply disagree. Let's just leave it at that. Um,
yeah.
yeah,
Um,
but so what's the conclusion that we're coming to here? Like, I mean, because if you think that I fail, right? Like, if I lose, well, then you lose too. Um, because you're
because
just
we both have what would seem like morally absurd positions according to both of our moral systems. So I mean, in a way, I guess, but once again, I'm not necessarily sure on the anencephaly thing, and you may not be sure with the whole human thing. So
yeah, but
um
what aren't you sure about when it comes to non-sentient human beings? They do exist.
right, because of how it would affect the well-being of other people. And if
Yeah,
we were to establish that rule,
but this is a different thing now you're talking about. Oh, you're moving the goalpost.
I'm not moving the goalpost. It's just that we're talking about these things in a vacuum, and that does make it kind of hard sometimes when we're talking about
But
ethical.
that's name the trait. That's what name the trait does.
Right, right. And we've already laid out our positions in vacuums. So I mean, I don't know what more there is to talk about.
Okay, well, I don't know. Maybe you want to make a closing statement and we could call it a day.
Yeah. Well, this wasn't as big of a shit show as I thought it was going to be. It did get a little cringy every now and then, but overall, I enjoyed it. I hope you did too. Yeah, if anybody wants to check out my channel, it's just my first and last name, Brandon, BrandonMize. And I also have, if you want to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you can just look me up by my first and last name, or just go over to my channel. I have all my platforms. And once again, like veganism, I this is more of a fun conversation for me. I like having I like having this conversation with people because it does test their moral system, and I like philosophizing about this sort of thing. But I'm really interested in politics as well. So if you are into left leaning politics, come on over. Or if you're into right leaning politics, you can come over as well. I don't care. You can shit on me in the comments. I don't care. We can have a debate on some sort of political topic as well. And you can reach me. I would prefer through Twitter or my email. So you can find all that stuff on my YouTube channel, and you can get a hold of me if you guys want to talk about something. But and by the way, I'm not even sure how to say your name. Is it Carnival or Carneval?
The first one.
Carnival. Okay, just making sure. All right. Well, thanks for the conversation, Carnival.
Yeah,
It
no
was
problem. Thanks for coming through.
yeah, it was fun, and I hope you talk to Ask Yourself again, because I'm sure he would have better answers to this than me, because he focuses on veganism. Like politics is my main thing, and then veganism comes after.
Look, I'm gonna address that real quick. Talking to that guy is like talking to a wall. He doesn't allow you to speak. If it were on a different channel with a neutral moderator, maybe I would, but I gave him a
I'm on
chance.
my channel. Hell yeah.
He completely disrespected me. He wouldn't let me talk. Like, and I know he cannot. He's incorrigible, because if you saw his debate with Foot Soldier, it was the same shit show all over again. I don't have. As I said in my debate, I'm too old to get into this type of shit with people who are completely disrespectful and autistic and don't let you say what it is you want to say, and they just want to steer the conversation because they have this algorithm designed of, and this maze of how the argument should go, and should you stray anywhere else, they have to get back on track because they just don't know how to debate. So I'm not. It's not worth raising my blood pressure, that guy. But if he keeps, besides, he's never contacted me. He's got my email. If he and I talk behind the scenes, then maybe we could work something out. But he's never reached out to me, so I don't even want to talk about the guy, to be honest with you. So that's really it. So, but thanks for coming on. The conversation was, I think, instructive, a little bit confusing, sometimes frustrating, but I expected that. So I'm just gonna make if you want to say something else, go on ahead. I'm gonna just make my closing statement. You could stick around for that or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, thanks, man. It was definitely fun and frustrating. That's how a debate should be. So, thanks again, and yeah, if any of you want to come on over and check me out, please do. Brandon Mize. Thanks,
Right
Carnival.
on. Yeah, take it easy, man.
See you.
All right, everybody. Sorry I had no chance to read the chat very much. I had to concentrate very hard because this stuff is very confusing. But basically, right off the bat, I'm just going to give my closing thoughts on this. I found it a little sneaky. I don't mean to insult Brandon or anything like that. Like, he's a cool dude and all that. But it was a little sneaky. I think most of you would agree, for the people that push name the trait to present it as such, and then have this fallback argument that I'm not privy to, and this whole difference between formal or informal. Look, if this is the argument as you presented it, and if it works the way it is, then let's just stick to that argument. So I thought it was a little bit sneaky and maybe a little bit disingenuous to try to all of a sudden reframe the argument as something else, something that it actually isn't. And I just didn't have the time or desire to delve into that because that's not how I understand the argument. So right then, we hit a major wall. But basically, as far as what the takeaway here is, I mean, like I said, I think name the trait as it is presented. I'm going to talk about it because that's how I understand it. That's how it was always presented to me. It's a paradox involving a false statement or a hidden error. So when you say, humans are of moral value, but in your back pocket you have this justification that humans are of moral value because they are sentient, what you're really saying is that sentient human beings are of moral value, not humans in general, because there are non-sentient human beings. What you're really saying is sentient beings are of moral value, period. So what you're doing is you're framing your moral system that obviously includes people and animals because you're vegan, blah, 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 right? So humans being of moral value, or this premise, humans are of moral value, can only be true as it stands right then and there if your trait is human, because that's what gives humans moral value, right? Again, if you say it's sentience, that doesn't mean humans are of moral value because that excludes non-sentient human beings, right? So that's the hidden error, in my opinion. And it gets us down to this paradox where, you ask me to name the trait, I say it's intelligence, and then you say, well, that means you have to bite the bullet on killing and eating non-intelligent human beings. And I say, no, you don't, because humans are of moral value. That's where the whole thing falls apart, in my opinion. I hope that makes sense to people. If your premises don't hold true throughout the whole argument, then the argument falls apart. So no, you can't eat dumb people, obviously, right? You can't eat people that are of certain height or for whatever stupid reason, right? And we all agree on this because humans are of moral value. Humans aren't of moral value because they're sentient. They're not of moral value because they're beautiful or ugly or what have you. They are of moral value because they're humans. So name the trait names the trait itself, human. But then it tries to get you to contradict yourself when you already named the trait as human by naming intelligence or what have you, something else. And when you do name the trait human, these vegans, they have to run to these like crazy, impossible, imagined scenarios that really don't have any bearing on reality. And I don't think it's valid to base ethical moral systems on things that are not likely to happen. At the very least, you can't even, they're impossible. Anyway, I know a lot of you guys were probably bored as fuck during the whole thing. I was definitely frustrated. Maybe I'll just hang out for a few minutes if you guys feel like asking some questions or giving me some of your takeaways, any thoughts you may have. And if not, I'm just going to go eat some fucking meat because it's about that time. So if you guys have any questions, hit me up. If not, we're just going to call it a day. But me personally, I'm done with this name the trait without giving a reason why humans have moral value. Humans is an arbitrary trait to pick. And the way I would answer that is it's not arbitrary because you cannot choose to be human. It's not arbitrary. It's not up to you. It's not subjective. It's objective, right? You being a human, it's objective. You are or you are not a human. So it cannot be arbitrary. So I think that debunks this whole arbitrary thing. What's arbitrary is sentience. Because, well, this is just how you feel, like you decide, well, I don't know. I don't know about that. Anyway, maybe I'm wrong about sentience being it's an arbitrary line that you draw. If you want to say that human is an arbitrary line that I draw, well, I mean, that's the line humans have drawn forever. That's the line that any species draws, right? Like, I'm team people, I'm team human. If then this is why veganism is anti-humanism, because it rejects traditional human life. It rejects the way we've always done things. It rejects how we've conceptualized what human is, who we are as human beings. It completely rejects all of that. It's anti-human. That's why you guys don't like the trait human. You don't. You're just a bunch of self-hating motherfuckers, man. Do an after show. I'll join you. Email me at Carneval at Tutanota, the email address. It's under all of my videos. Here, I'll just put it in the. And I'll send you a link if you want to join, because I'm my throat's getting a little bit sore here. I just ran out of water. But if you want to hop on SD and contribute what it is you want to contribute, then you're more than welcome to hop on. I'm trying to post. There we go. I'm going to check my email now. So do I have any more debates planned? No, I have a chat planned with Millennial Prepster. It's going to be more chill. It's going to be more about why we believe eating meat is ethical. I mean, I guess we kind of be preaching to the choir with that one, but I'm not sure exactly what it is he wants to talk about. Whenever I talk to Millennial, I just trust that he comes prepared, and he does. And he just talks about what it is he wants to talk about. And if I have something to contribute, I do that. So we tend to have good conversations that flow, perhaps because we tend to agree, even though a lot of the times we don't. So eating meat is natural. Yeah, that's just the thing. 99 point blah 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 percent says the argument against veganism is the fact that they have to place unrealistic values on every single thing. When you do that, you have to justify that value. It's a waste of time. Yeah, it's just not realistic. Veganism rejects reality. That's why these guys have to escape to these. They have to paint these BS scenarios, and they have to create these hypotheticals, which in my opinion aren't even hypotheticals. And maybe if you could concede that it's somehow hypothetical, because in some reality that could, I guess, happen, it has no bearing on reality. It doesn't inform us about the world as it exists right now. It creates this imaginary world. And look, if that world is to come to transpire, if that world is to happen, and you could have these godlike beings that aren't human, or these non-human human beings, well, then obviously our ethical values are going to change in accordance with what that world will be. But the way this world is now, we have to accept reality for what it is, and we have to talk about things that apply to reality. Anything else is just, it's a waste of time. It's just like all these mental gymnastics that nobody, I think, learns anything from. It's just, they're just like these, they seem to be these ego trips for a lot of people, right? Like, oh, I schooled them in a debate, or, all that other bullshit. Anyway, I'm checking my email, trying to see if I've gotten anything from anybody who wants to hop on. And if you just want to hop on, whomever you may be, vegan, meat eater, I don't care, I'll send you a link. If you don't behave, I'll just cut the stream. Still no email. So anyway, I'm gonna go back to the chat, see what you guys are saying. Non-sentient human holocaust in an isolated vacuum, completely fine. Yeah, you're probably just being facetious. The fight between free people and slaves has begun. Yeah, I agree. Eating meat is natural, of course. But to the vegan, nature is a fallacy, right? They reject nature. They reject our human nature. They reject humanity. They are anti-human. That's really what it comes down to. I don't understand hypotheticals. I understand hypotheticals, and I just explained why I reject impossible hypotheticals. They have no bearing on the real world. I think it's insane to think that you could derive an ethical system from a world that doesn't exist and apply it to the world that does exist and call that ethical or just or even logical. It doesn't make any sense. The reason why hypotheticals are used and the way they've been used traditionally is, they're hypotheticals that are very much possible. It's possible that you could get stuck on an you can also debunk NTT by rejecting the importance of consistency. Put consistency number 2 on the list instead of number 1. Now it's impotent. That's a good point. Come on to hang out and explain exactly what you mean. My brain is a little tired right now, so it is what it is. But again, this hypothetical scenario of being stuck on a desert island, that has happened to people. That could happen to you, right? A ship could crash and you and a couple other people could swim to this desert island, and you run out of food, you got to eat each other or something along those lines, right? It's a hypothetical, but it's a reasonable hypothetical. This whole, godlike, and it's so crazy that these people who are atheists, right, they don't believe in any sort of godlike creature or God, period. It's crazy that they present these creatures as hypotheticals, like they all of a sudden believe that they could exist. Hypotheticals are fine as long as they follow logically. Well, but that's the whole problem. They don't follow logically because it's illogical to say you could remove humanity from the human and call it human, right? That's not logical. It isn't. Is it logical to say that well, I mean, in and of itself, it is or isn't logical to say something, say anything. It's because logic is a progression of points here that are being made, right? Does one point follow from the previous point? Does the next point follow from the previous point? That's logic. I think hypotheticals have to be reasonable, okay? As I already explained. And because these people that I'm talking to believe morality is subjective, if we're talking about determining an ethical moral system, well, it's up to me. I could accept or reject things. If I deem something unreasonable, and there's a very good argument that it is unreasonable, then why does this have to figure into my subjective ethical system, as they put it? It doesn't. So I just reject it, period. Anyway, we have SD who wants to come on the stream. I'm sending you a link right now. Just got your email. So come on and tell us what you think. Introduce yourself. Or let's talk about anti-nutrients. Oh, Speria. Anti-nutrient humans. Vegans use hypotheticals because that's all they got. I completely agree. It's, these, I would call impossible hypotheticals, have no bearing in the real world. So it is what it is. We should have SD coming on the show. He was in the chat. I'm guessing he's a philosopher. I guess he could tell us whether he is or isn't, because I've seen him paying attention to, being interested in some of these philosophical debates that I myself don't really have any interest in. I'm more interested in the here and the now, the real, the tangible, right? I mean, the meat of the matter, if you will. Hello there, SD.
Hi, how are you? I've just got to mute the stream.
Right on.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you well. Can the chat hear you fine? Let us know, guys, if you could hear SD.
Yeah, you watch that. Sometimes I get called like too loud. I don't know if my mic is at a good level.
It's pretty good. I tend to speak loudly, and it seems like you're more of a soft talker. But yeah, you do have it turned up, is what I'm saying. But
trying to keep my voice down. But yeah, I was listening to that, and I wanted to come on because there were so many points in that discussion that I wanted to chip in on, and I said the things that I wanted to say in the live chat, but it's
not the same.
No, it's not the same. You're right. It's always better to do things over voice, I think. So, I mean, name the trait. There's something you can do with it. It's quite easy. You can just sort of you can demote consistency because it assumes that consistency is one of the, or if not the biggest goal to achieve in life. And consistency isn't really part of ethics as far as I'm concerned. I've seen many demonstrations where you can just knock consistency right out of the equation. So if consistency isn't something to strive for, name the trait would fall apart straight away, because it aims to reduce you to either inconsistency or absurdity. There's a lot of problems with absurdity, as has been pointed out by many other people, including Foot Soldier, one of my good friends on YouTube, and Shadow Starshine. He's another one. Perspective Philosophy. Want to give him a shout out. Like, they've all pointed out like the philosophical problems with the name the trait. You were aiming to point out practical problems, and I completely agree with you on most of what you said. There was a couple of bits there that I couldn't nitpick about.
I'm not a philosopher. I freely admit that. I'm not really interested in philosophy. It's just not my thing. But yeah, I was more pragmatic, definitely, and you approach it from you seems like you're more interested in grounding and rejecting some of the assumptions, maybe.
Yeah, because built into name the trait is the assumption that consistency is like the pinnacle of morality, and it's not, because situation A, you might act, you may take action 1, for example. Situation B, which is obviously not situation A, you might take action 2. And they go, well, what's the difference? Well, guess what? The situations were different.
Can I just jump in for a second? Would it be something along the lines of, let's say there's a building on fire, right? And my kids are in the building. If I'm in charge, I want the firefighters to go in there and get my kids. But if I'm not in charge, I want them to get everybody at the same time, right?
Yeah,
I don't want them to prefer somebody else's kids over my kids.
Yeah, in an ideal world, that's the in a vacuum situation. But we don't live in a vacuum.
Right.
So to take it back to like something more practical, you could construct a moral system that says, let's all treat each other equally. And therefore, your kids and my kids are both in a burning building, the same burning building. Whose kids do you want to save most if you're honest about it? They're yours, right? You might like my kids, you might even like me, but let's be honest, you want to save your kids.
Obviously.
It has to come back to a practical point at some time in the conversation. Like these vegans, not all of them, definitely not all of them. I know some of them quite well, and I consider them online friends. Perspective Philosophy, Foot Soldier, as I've said before. But when you start coming up with things like cosmic carnivorous space cows that want to come to Earth and eat your babies, it gets a bit, well, you know, it's the difference between on paper and in practice. And that's something that I come up against quite a lot in my job, in my life. You can have something that seems to work really well on paper, and like you go down the formula, you look at like premise 1, premise 2, and you get to your conclusion. You think, oh, well, what's the difference? Well, there's a million differences. And it's going to be very difficult to persuade anybody to change the behavior based on something that's not real. And I know what the response to this is from the vegans. Like, oh, well, it's prescriptive, not descriptive. Well, what business do they have arguing prescriptively? Because they're all moral subjectivists anyway. Well, not all. There are some that aren't, but and it just gets a bit weird at that point. I mean, that guy that you were talking to, I'm not familiar with him. I've never spoken to him before. Seems like an okay kind of dude, I guess. but his argumentation is really weak because he's trying to present you name the trade in the way that it's actually used, rather than the like the formalized version of it. And you picked up on that several times. And he tries to sort of chop back and forth a little bit. It's kind of weird because if your argument works on paper, that's one thing, but does it work in practice? And that's what you were taking apart there.
Well, yeah, because ultimately veganism is a real thing that applies or supposed to the real world, and I'm just a real person that wants to be morally correct in the world as it exists. This whole, that's why I'm not that interested in philosophy. I mean, it's a great cognitive exercise, and maybe you could train your brain in certain ways by delving into these hypotheticals or whatever. But yeah, like, are you familiar with the formal version, and have you looked into that at all? And I would venture
I've
against.
seen it.
I would venture against that they're not congruent. That there's like they're sneaking something in there that's not really supposed to be there. It's really, in my opinion, without knowing anything about it, it was designed to confuse.
If you, I don't know if you saw it or not, but if you watched Shadow Starshine and Foot Soldier's video, that Foot Soldier's vegan, Shadow isn't, but they both took this to task, right, in a detailed way. Perspective philosophy also was very heavily involved in that, and the guy's got a master's in philosophy, and he is vegan, but he's actually a really cool guy. And they did like an in-depth sort of analysis on this, like dismantling it in the formalized way. And it's, I mean, where are we at now with Name the Trade? Is it version 5? I think it is. I think it's on number 5. That's the last I knew. And like these guys, they just
sorry to
rip
interrupt
it.
you.
Go ahead.
Am I okay in saying? Am I correct in saying that they're moving the goalpost? It just seems to be like you're saying. It seems to morph and change. Go on ahead.
It kind of does, especially in the informal version, like, because that can be sort of warped and morphed to like tailor to who you're talking to. But as for the formalized version, that's been ripped to bits. Foot Soldier he wrecked it on his own. But then Perspective Philosophy and Shadow Starshine got together, and they just went through it step by step with it on screen, like the actual formal argument. And they pulled it to pieces. And it wasn't even that difficult. I mean, you don't have to be, I mean, I'm no fucking philosopher. And even I could understand what they were saying. I could see where the problems were. And you get these sort of, I don't want to be rude to anybody, but like you get some vegans who are going to come on and defend this to the death, and they're going to go down with the ship. But it's kind of strange because it makes me think, well, do you care about whether your argument works or not, or do you just want to defend it anyway?
Yeah, they're just ideologues.
I do tend to think so in a lot of cases. There are definitely exceptions to this. I mean, the people I've already mentioned, I won't mention them again.
Yeah.
But it's it's really difficult. I mean, I've got, these vegan friends that I'm talking about online, and sometimes I want to argue against the things that I say, that they say, that I say. Sometimes I want to argue against me too. But I don't know. I mean, where do you draw the line? It's an odd one for me, this whole veganism thing.
So you're not vegan, I gather. You're just interested in this because of some kind of intellectual pursuit, or?
No, I'm not vegan, and I don't argue against veganism.
Mm-hmm.
What I argue against is what I perceive to be crap arguments for veganism.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of arguments being presented that even if I were to accept everything about those arguments, they don't actually get you to veganism. What they get you to is opposition to factory farming.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the same thing as an argument for veganism. Those are two different things.
I've said it many times that a lot of the arguments, not even the philosophical ones, just the way people argue for veganism, they use the factory farm. I would call it a straw man, because most people that do eat meat, once they become aware of the factory farm, they're not okay with that either. So like, we're on the same side, but they use that factory farm porn, if you will, to essentially brainwash people into thinking that that's how it happens 100% of the time, when that's actually the minority of red meat production, I would say.
Maybe. I don't know if I'd be able to go so far as to say that it's the majority, but yeah, I mean, I can understand why that's what they argue against. I'm almost playing devil's advocate, I suppose. It's understandable to me why they would want to argue against factory farming, because your average Joe on the street, like, they're going to McDonald's and they're, buying their meat in supermarkets and stuff. I'm not doing that. Even the people that I've mentioned know that I'm not doing that. So I'm putting it out that I'm not doing that. I take my own game. I've got like certain ways of doing things. And I think we've actually, myself and Perspective Philosophy, and I hope Foot Soldier will be also involved in this conversation. I think we've got a chat scheduled soon to like go through why I do what I do. But it comes back to, even if I accept everything that the normal vegan argument involves, it doesn't get me to veganism. It's just oppose factory farming, which I already oppose anyway. So I guess it demonstrates that you don't have to be vegan in order to oppose factory farming.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing. And it's like, I don't know, when you introduce people, I mean, like some of the people that I mentioned, that they'll have already talked to me anyway, but when you introduce people to these sort of newer ideas, they like, well, okay, some of them will just cave in straight away. Others will argue a bit more furiously. And it's like, well, again, I guess I'm repeating myself, but some of the arguments, in fact, most of the arguments for veganism don't get you to veganism.
Well, and if name the trade were to be valid anyway, which I have a hard time understanding how it is, vegans can't justify their worldview with it either. Like, everybody fails, when you apply it practically the way I tend to do it, and I try to demonstrate that, and I think he realized that I was right, at least to some degree, because again, if he puts me in that retarded kid corner or something, I just the same could put him in the anencephaly kid corner, and whatever answer he gives, which should justify veganism, I should be able to give the same answer, no?
Yeah, I did notice that point, because he did say that he wasn't sure whether it was okay to eat humans or not. And like, this is just another example of something that appears to work on paper. I mean, you have these rules, and if you abide by them, like if you're consistent, yeah, because they're looking for consistency all the time, then you have to say, nope, can't eat humans. So he said, can't eat humans. You said, what about kids with anencephaly? And he's like, I'm not sure. It was really strange. I mean, I'm usually quite lucky if I catch a live stream. That's why I wanted to come on and just sort of share my 2 pence with.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, is there anything else you wanted to add insofar as like maybe what mistakes that I've made or anything at all? You said you had as it was happening live, you had a lot to contribute. I don't know if you still remember some of those points, something that stood out to you.
I remember some that were going on in the chat. They might not directly relate to what you said, because
That's fine.
at one point I said, ask him if it's okay to name more than one trait.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember what he said to that. I don't want to straw man the guy. But what you usually get is, when you try to present, I mean, I Hypocrite did this with Ask Yourself. They had 3 debates. And what happened was iHypocrite tried to present a sort of conglomeration of traits, which is like a number of traits. And ask yourself, wanted to go through them one by one and debunk them one by one, and then say, well, all these zeros add up to 0.
Right.
Because it doesn't matter how many zeros you add together, you're still going to end up with fuck all.
But they all happen simultaneously. You can't do that.
Yeah, but what happened there was, I mean, I'm talking about that debate, and this is an argument that I presented to quite a few vegans, and they've kind of seen where I'm coming from, is if you have, let's say you have 10 reasons why you kill, for example, a rabbit, and there's a scale of justification that goes from 1 to 10, 1 being not particularly good justification, 10 being great justification. What they want to do is they want to put them all at 0, which is unreasonable. If you have 10 justifications which all sit at 1 on the justification scale, you add them all together, and now you've got a 10, right? So the whole can be greater than the sum of its parts.
That does make sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's like an example that I've used before is something like epoxy adhesive, like the glue. It's a 2-part compound. You've got a resin and a catalyst. Either one of those on its own, completely useless. I mean, you might as well chuck it in the bin if you've only got one of them. But you put them together, now you've got something really useful. So the only way they can try to tackle this is to put them all at 0. But if they can put all of your 10 reasons at 0, you can put theirs at 0 as well, because it's going to be subjective at that point. You can just dismiss anything if you're going to do that.
Yeah, and it just brings me back to my original point that no one can quote unquote win this game. It's like designed to make you fail no matter what. If you agree to play by those rules, obviously, which, like you're saying, you don't have to, because consistency, I mean, well, that's subjective, I guess. Whether or not,
I mean, consistency, whether you think it's subjective or objective, you can blow it out of the park, because guess what? Situation A and situation B, not the same thing.
yeah. I mean, and if you look at sentience, for example, not to say that they reject having multiple traits as invalid, but sentience in and of itself is a conglomeration of different traits, because it's the ability to hear, see, experience reality subjectively, feel pain. So it's a whole bunch of different qualia is really what it is, right? It's not any one trait in particular. It's a whole bunch of different traits. And another problem with name the trait is that, any particular trait is on a spectrum too. It's not like we could just bring all these traits down to they're one and the same. For example, the way we experience reality as human beings is obviously going to be different than fish or mollusks or something like that. So I don't know.
I think most vegans, at least the ones that I've talked to, that they would agree. It gets kind of difficult because there are like sort of insentient things like bivalves. I mean, bivalves is a thing in the vegan community. So like some of them will say, yeah, you can eat bivalves. Others will say, no, you can't eat those. So, I mean, it's always going to come down to where you draw the line.
And that's completely and utterly subjective. Why can't I draw the line where I draw it currently? Like, why,
You can.
Name the trait.
That's the thing. I mean, I guess, I mean, I hope me coming on this stream doesn't sort of annoy some of the vegans that I'm friends with. But I just wanted to say, those couple of things. I mean, name the trait, just reject consistency, because it's not the pinnacle of morality. It never has been. It never will be. You can dispense with it in that way. Plus, that's another thing I wanted to say. Like, your rejection of the hypothetical arguments. There are hypothetical arguments which are useful. There are also ones that aren't. I mean, let's say we're having a disagreement about maybe living with disability, right? I've never broken my leg. Either of them makes it sound like I've only got one, but I got two. I've never broken either one. You could ask me to consider a hypothetical wherein I've broken my leg and say, well, how would you feel if you couldn't, walk up and down the stairs unaided? And, how would you feel if you had to sort of sit there with a plaster cast on while you're trying to take a shit or something? And I'll go, oh yeah, fuck yeah, I guess I can put myself in that situation. Like, that's a fair hypothetical.
Yeah.
But when you start talking about, cosmic carnivorous space cows that want to come to Earth and eat everybody, and how would you feel then? Like, why don't you stab your mother in the face and eat it? I mean, we're not we're way off the golf course now.
Yeah, it has no practical application whatsoever, which is what veganism is supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, this is the difference between on paper and in practice, and that's how I've always put it. It just seems odd to me, because you could do this with anything. I mean, if anything goes in a hypothetical, then you could ask a vegan, any hypothetical vegan, doesn't have to be the one that you were talking to, well, what if cows enjoy being stabbed in the face for hamburgers? What if it brings them pleasure? What if it maximizes their well-being? What if it maximizes humans' well-being? And they enjoy it. And, if they didn't know that we weren't going to stab them in the face for hamburgers, they'd be sad. It's going to be difficult to say, don't stab them.
You don't know. That's the thing. You're assuming a lot. You're anthropomorphizing these animals in a way. And that's an extreme argument you presented. I would say something along the lines of, my goats love it here. I let them out in the pasture every day. There's no fence. They could go wherever the hell they want to go. They always come back every night. They like me.
One.
Right. Yeah. They see me butchering other goats. They don't think anything of it. Right. If you want to look at them and attribute human feelings or emotions or cognitive ability to these animals, well, clearly they're choosing to be here knowing exactly what's going to happen. They give me their milk willingly. I give them corn in exchange. They're happy. Like, how are you going to tell me that these animals are sad, right? Factory farm, okay, straw man. That's not what's happening here, for example. That's not where I get majority of my meat. So
no, it's definitely not. No.
So all these, basically what I'm saying, everything that they attribute to these animals, I could flip it around and say, well, they've become some of the most successful species on the planet because of how we use them, and it's more of a symbiotic relationship than an exploitative one, the way you paint it, right? Prove me wrong. I mean, I have plenty of evidence to suggest that what I'm saying is correct. And, because again, the logical extension of the vegan ideology is that all these animals are going to go extinct. So how is that better for their sentience when there's not going to be any more sentience if what you say happens? And while, yes, I do eliminate sentience, there's some pain, I also make their life a lot better than in the wild, and I create new sentience every day. Maybe not every day, but you get the point, right? So
sure.
If sentience is important, how is killing it more noble than what I'm doing?
I think, well, not I think, I know, because I've talked to a few, but some of them would bite the bullet on that. They would just say, the most common example that they use is cows. And we say, well, if we don't want something from cows, cows aren't going to exist anymore. And that's pretty much true insofar as I can tell. And they'll say, well, not all of them, like that, I've got to add that caveat, not all of them, will say, okay, if it means cows have to go extinct, so be it, as long as you stop farming them, as long as you stop eating them and exploiting them and all this. And you can accept that argument, like, for the sake of it. But like the point that I was making there with like the ridiculous hypothetical thing is I've done this with vegans before. I won't name any names because I don't want to embarrass anybody, but you can come up with a hypothetical, and if you have to go along with it, you can argue for anything, literally anything. You can argue that rape is okay if you want to go along with a hypothetical, because we can just say, oh, well, in my hypothetical world, rape maximizes well-being. It makes everything feel better. Everybody feels better. The planet flourishes. Suddenly there's no global warming as long as we rape each other. Are you going to say rape is okay? Well, of course you are in that situation, except that's not reality.
Yeah, that's a good example, definitely. And this is kind of what it feels like with this whole name the trait nonsense, is that, you know, they have this goal, veganism, and they're going to twist and warp reality and use whatever trickery they can use to try to fit their argumentative strategy to bring about this goal. So it's not like they attained, and it's not like anyone actually became vegan because of name the trait. You know what I mean? Not, at least not the people that are really pushing it. They
I
had some
doubt it.
other reason, and then they feel like this is a good justification, even though that's not what convinced them. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, even I would wager that most of the vegans that I know online, and they know who they are because some of them will be listening right now, most of them, they don't support name the trait. They think it's a lame argument. And they would never, I don't think anyway, try to persuade you with name the trait. Or me.
Yeah, there was a point in time where everybody swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. All the vegans, because it sounds good at first, right? Unless you start breaking it apart,
On
start getting,
paper.
yeah, you start getting into these debates, people start disagreeing, and all of a sudden you think to yourself, yeah, well, the other guy's kind of making sense too. So yeah, fuck this name the trade shit. I think I'd like to be able to say that it's dying, and you know, being
I would agree with you. This is a debate that I followed for, I don't know, maybe 3 years now. And it's not really taking off in terms of popularity. I mean, there are vegans actually arguing against it.
yeah.
And that's good to see, you know, because most of the vegans I know online, I don't know any in real life, but that's down to my location. But most of the vegans I know online, they would argue pretty hard against
Mhm.
it.
Yeah, it's kind of silly. Anyway, we have HBC on the line. What's up, man? How's it going?
Hey, good. How you doing? Can you hear me okay?
Oh, we hear you just fine. I'm actually
Oh,
going
good.
to turn your mic down just a little bit, but
All
you're
right.
good.
Great.
You got anything you want to contribute?
Oh, yeah, I kind of been following this whole debate back and forth with you guys, and I was just looking at the kind of the way it kind of goes around and around. But I think the thing is too, like with it being sort of, I think it's sort of self-refuting, the whole vegan position, right? Because it, on the one hand, it's saying that you know, the syllogism saying that humans have moral value, and then um, kind of suggesting or insisting that it's based on like a trait. But then, like when you're looking at like marginal cases, which there's the argument for marginal cases,
Yeah,
like which
Peter
is,
Singer's argument.
yeah, it's Peter Singer's argument, and that's kind of a, and I guess the name the trait is sort of a like a variation of that. But don't marginal cases sort of refute the name the trait thing in and of themselves? I mean, they're like, it's like if you're going to say that, or you're going to suggest that marginal cases would be something that, like if somebody has reduced sentience, then they would be of lesser moral value, would they not? Like
Like
it's
everything is on a continuum, basically.
right. It's on a continuum, but like if, but I, but to go to the, I think a sort of a direct way to expose that would be like if somebody's insisting that you name a trait, I would just name human moral value as the trait.
Hmm.
I mean, if the trait
Yeah.
being anything, if the trait is being anything that's true of a being or something, then why could not the moral value assigned to that being be the trait in question?
Well, maybe the argument, counter argument to that would be, well, someone who's really retarded they don't have, if I'm understanding what you're saying, they're not capable of making moral decisions, right? They don't have morality, if you will. But that's again what you're talking about. I think a marginal case, right? It's really about, I'm not sure I'm getting this entirely, so you correct me if I'm wrong, but it's really about us as a human species, as a society, if you will, rather than, a few retards here and there, which in any given situation could be considered, and this used to happen, less than human. You're not quite human, right?
Well, that's kind of what's being suggested by that, right? Well, the marginal cases would be that if a retarded individual would not be as have a high of moral value as somebody who's more sentient, if it's like this gradient based on the value being based on sentience.
It depends on what trait you name.
Right, it depends on what trait you name, but that just exposes the fact that it's not based on these traits or a a assemblage of traits or anything like that.
You don't have to be consistent.
Right. Yeah. But I think you, Carnival, you hit on that with the example with the what is it, encephalosophy? I can't say the word. Whatever. Encephaly. Right. Okay. So then you would have to bite the bullet and say, well, no, they don't have any moral value. Neither does a fetus. So you could eat fetuses. You can eat babies with encephalitis or whatever it is. You would totally be permitted to do that.
Because you got to be consistent.
I think name the trait would be, I would throw out there would be human moral value. Then have them argue either that humans aren't valuable, which they would have to do, or argue that that's not a trait or that's not something that's true of humans. And then what are they left with? What can they come back with if you name the trait human moral value? Because a trait can also be a set of behaviors, and doesn't a morality sort of arise out of a set of behaviors, and human behaviors, and then that could also be attached to the moral value that you ascribe to humans. I was just, as a thought experiment, I was trying to think about, okay, so how would somebody arguing name the trait deal with that as the named trait?
Well, and that's the thing that gets me, because if we agree that humans are of moral value, that assumes all humans, right? Anyone that you consider to be a human. But then 2 seconds later, you're trying to get me to commit to saying that, a retard doesn't have moral value when you just told me that it does. So as far as refuting itself, I think that's where it does that. Well, one of the instances anyway.
Yeah, that's where I think naming the trait as human moral value, that defeats that. Going around and around and going, do retarded people have lesser values? No, they have moral value because that's the moral value assigned to them. That's not the thing in question. I mean, they're trying to make that contingent on some trait evaluation or some trait constellation or something that you either have or don't have. Well, it's not based on that, but that's the inference in the argument, is that moral value is assigned based on an assessment of traits, but it's not. And that's why I was saying marginal cases it exposes that when you go into marginal cases. Well, if it's assigned based on a trait or being sentient, then of course there would be retarded people would be of lesser moral value. That's what they would have to argue. But I think naming the trait as human moral value defeats that. Why can't that be named as the trait? Is it not true of humans?
What do you think, SD?
Well, I mean, I think, I've said many times already that name the trait is it's a pretty terrible argument. But something else that you can do is, if you What's the difference between like humans and cows, for example? So what is it that's true of the cow that, if true of the human, would make it true that you could like eat the human without moral objection? If you say something like all of the differences, however many differences there are between humans and cows, that's what makes it okay, right? Let's say there are a million of them and we've got them all written down on a piece of paper somehow. I don't know how we're going to do that, but potentially you could have like biologists and whatever to name all the differences. And the next step in that argument is to say, well, what if that was true of the other being? Well, then the other being would be the first being. So at that point, you're breaking the law of identity. And Foot Soldier and Perspective Philosophy and Shadow Starshine, with the exception of Shadow Starshine, they're all vegans, and they've pointed this out, like the massive errors within this argument. You can't be A and not A at the same time, right? That's just trying to smash the law of identity, which you're not going to succeed in doing. If your argument would break that, you have a shit argument.
Well, what if you were to ask me that question and I was going to come back to you with cows don't possess human moral value? What would you say?
Yeah, because we've already swapped all the traits over at that point. Because, like, I named all of the traits as every fucking difference that there is between humans and cows. So the next step in the argument is to swap them over and say, well, what if this was true of the cow? Well, in that case, the cow isn't a cow; it's a human.
Right. So if you were to say human moral value as the trait, it's not going to that's not going to be transferable to a cow simply for the fact that the cow is not human.
Yeah, not without breaking the law of identity.
To simply deal with this sophistry is to confront it head on with the fact that human beings have moral value, which they agree to. And if you name that as the trait, that's something that the animals do not possess, that humans possess by their admission. Where do they go? Where would they go with that argument? I'd be curious, but I can't get a vegan to debate with me, no matter how hard I try. I mean, I'm banned out of the Discord chat and all that, but I was just curious how they would deal with that.
I wouldn't name human moral value as the trait.
Now, why not?
Well, because it leaves them room to go somewhere else with it. Whereas if you just name every trait, all of them, every difference.
But go ahead and
you can't swap it over at that point.
Go ahead and give it a run. Like, what would your objection be to human moral value as a trait? Playing devil's advocate as a vegan position, you said that they would wiggle out of it. How so? Give me an example.
They would try to say something along the lines of, "Well, that's circular." But I tend to agree with you.
I mean, wait a minute. How is it circular if you're asking for a trait and I'm giving you a trait
and you agree
that it's true of that being, then that is the trait that I'm going to name. Now you can argue that that's not true of the being. That's not human moral value is not human. Human would be more circular if you just say, well, human, that would be somewhat circular. But if you say your human moral value as a trait that's true of a human, that's not circular.
Right. I mean, they do admit it exists, right? So
they admit it exists. So
that's the crux of the argument. It does. Without that, it doesn't work. So how would they answer that? I mean, shit, I don't know. Probably using fancy words and all kinds of trickery. I don't know.
Carneval, if you don't mind, I have a message that somebody's asked me to pass on to you. Do you mind if I read it out?
Go ahead. I mean, I don't know. I might after you too.
This is just I asked if there was anything that they would want me to say, and this is the response that I got. And it says, Foot Soldier says you're a cock. So I don't know how you want to respond to that. It's up to you. It's your stream.
Hey, it's his opinion. That's okay.
Okay. I promised I'd say it.
No, that's fine. It's not a big deal. I think Foot Soldier is a gorgeous individual. I think, he's one day going to attain all the gains that he wants to attain. But for the time being, I'm just gonna make fun of the clown. It's all. And if he thinks I'm a cunt or
he's a nice guy.
that's your opinion. I respect that. I have no problem with the guy whatsoever. He could call me any name under the sun. It's all good. It's all good.
I know.
I am a cock. I'm a dickhead and an asshole. You know what I mean? I'm everything in between.
Okay.
Tell me something I don't know.
I guess he got his sound bite then.
It's all good.
I did ask him if he wanted to come into the chat. I mean, like, I haven't sent him the link or anything, but like, if
he's
if
welcome
he'd have
to.
said yes, then
No, he's welcome to. I don't have a problem with the personally.
he's a cool guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's in his videos always insulting people, talking shit, and he thinks it's fine because it's YouTube banter. So it's all good. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. I'm not worried about the man. I wish him all the best, and it's all good.
Is he saying cock? Is he saying cock like you're a rooster, like an alpha male?
Maybe.
I would take it that way. I would think that's what. I think that's what he means.
I really don't care, and anytime he wants to go for a bike race, I'll smoke that ass.
Do you want me to see if I can get him on? Because, like,
of course.
I imagine he's watching.
If he wants to come on, because he's got some gripes with me, and that's fine. I understand why. He wants to get to the bottom of this. He's more than welcome to. I was going to suggest as much, but
maybe you could just shoot the shit for a bit or whatever.
Yeah, I don't care. I don't dislike the guy. I don't know him. I don't have a problem with him whatsoever. You know what I mean? I just thought his progress was hilarious, and he did as well. He was kind of trolling, and I just picked up what he's putting down. And was I wrong about some of the things? Probably, but that's because I didn't actually watch 30 minutes of him, on camera. So it is what it is. If I made a mistake or I misrepresented him, he has every right to come on here live, even if he wants to, and set me straight. But one thing he won't be doing is calling me a liar, because I did not knowingly.
I don't think he would do that.
I don't really
care. If he says that he's willing to come on, is it okay if I send him the link?
Of course.
All right, cool.
Anyway, name the trait. I'm basically done with that shit. I got more important things to do. I mean, it seems to have been attacked by various people on different social platforms from all kinds of angles, and all it does is just get butt fucked left and right. So I'm over it. Ask yourself. You could still send me an email. We could get on live on Skype, face to face, and we could talk it out. See what you'd be about. But having a debate with the guy, what's the point? I don't see a point.
No, I don't see a point either.
Yeah, I'm just, he's, I think you were saying this as he's more or less irrelevant or on his way there. So, yeah.
Well, it seems like it. I mean, he's been stuck on 17,000 subs for the last 2 years. So he's not exactly gaining traction, is he?
And even if you could have 100,000 subs and 500 views per video. So it's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't do YouTube, but it's kind of curious to me because I comment on, some stuff, and I challenged. Did you watch? I mean, do you even know who Banana Warrior Princess is? You seen that one?
Yeah, I've seen that one. I wouldn't.
I mean, I wrote a message on under one of her videos last night, her most recent one, saying, "Do you want to debate?" I haven't had a reply yet. Maybe she's busy. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I have an idea who she is, but I don't really know what she's about apart from veganism, and that tends to get a little bit boring here and there. The reason why I will check out someone like Foot Soldier once in a while is because, he is funny. I'll give him that. He is pretty funny.
He is. He's very funny.
Yeah.
He's also genuinely. I mean, like, I can't say I know the guy personally, but like in terms of online, I talk to the guy quite a lot. He's a nice dude.
Yeah. My problem with vegans is not really personally with any of them. Maybe Durian Rider. Okay, fine. But most of them, the problem is, you're not telling the truth. I know you believe that what you say is true, but it's not. A lot of this, these vegan arguments are just propaganda. It's BS. It's bad data. It's terrible. It's not even science. They're not scientific experiments that all these health claims are based on. And I've been begging for some vegan to come on the stream, bring some studies, and let's have a look at what it is that you call science, because it ain't. So that's my problem. It's just misinformation and not speaking the truth. Not to say that I never fail, but I don't do it because I just make mistakes, basically. That's all I'm saying. I'm not ideologically driven. Yeah, I'm not ideologically driven. I'm just hungry. You know what I mean? I gotta eat.
Yeah, but the Adventist Health Study, though, Carnival, you gotta get on board with the 7-day Adventists.
Well, but according to that one, people that eat fish do better. So where are we at with that?
Yeah, I mean, I just wonder, like, what do they consider the potential bias that's
Healthy
out of the
user bias?
Seventh-day Adventist Church? I mean, they're the ones that founded the American Dietetic Association too.
Well, I looked into this, and the way these people were selected was through health stores, vegan health stores, and vegan organizations. They went out, and this wasn't a random sample of the Adventist population. These were people that were sought after, or they found these people. So if I'm a vegan who has a vegan store and I'm selling, vegan products, of course I want the message to be that this is healthy. So I'm going to look at my customers that are healthy because they don't smoke, they don't drink, they hardly ever fuck. They're just healthy because of everything that they do, and veganism hasn't killed them yet. I'm going to be like, yo, you need to be part of this study because you're healthy as shit. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
there's
Carnival,
a selection bias there.
I have another guy who wants to come on the stream. I don't know how long you intend to stick around for, but
well, I mean,
sure. He's not vegan, so
look,
is it okay to give him the link?
Yeah, anybody's welcome. If it gets to a point where someone's just being obnoxious, well, we're gonna have to handle that. But
yeah, I don't think it's
no, it's fine. Yeah, whatever.
Right, I'll give him the link. He should be in the hangout within the next couple of minutes.
Well, I'm gonna actually go grab something to eat and drink, but you guys please continue. I'll be right back. Yeah, hold it down for me, please.
Okay, I'll try to. I guess I'm the only guy here going to be here, but yeah, go ahead, and I'll just spout out some stuff that I know.
Oh wait, SD's right back. So I'll be right back, guys.
Okay.
Please don't bore my audience.
We'll try not to. I'm gonna invite Magnus to see what he wants to say. And I'm not a moderator in this chat, so Magnus, I assume you're listening. I will DM you the link.
So, are you ex-vegan there?
I'm not. No.
No, me neither. But I've gone over to the so-called carnivore diet for about the past year, just out of stuff I've learned off of looking into the whole vegan thing, and yeah, it's been really good for me personally. My own anecdotal claim.
Yeah, but, I mean, I'm not part of the the carnivore movement or anything like that. I just eat what I consider to be a normal diet, but it seems that some people would disagree. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of different conflicting information out there. I would just want to ask somebody who's going to be insistent that fat and cholesterol is bad for you, then my question would be, like, let's take an individual that's like 400 pounds and they're going to lose that weight. They're gonna shoot for the goal of getting down to, like, under 200 pounds. Where's that 200 pounds of fat going to go? It's going to get metabolized, and right? I mean, it's going to be burnt off, which means it's going to be used for energy. It's going to be metabolized. Like, I've never heard the answer to this, but I would want to know, well, does that not put you at risk of heart disease by metabolizing all that fat? And it's saturated fat. A lot of what your body stores is saturated fat too. Now, wouldn't that saturated fat be deadly? I mean, what are all these doctors out there advising people to lose weight? Isn't that dangerous? I mean, I would think that would logically follow. This fat metabolism is essentially bad for you, and burning fat for fuel is fundamentally bad for your arteries. Then weight loss would be bad for you.
And why does our body store sugar as fat if it's bad for us?
Well, yeah, I mean, but the main point I was trying to make is, like, would that fat not harm your arteries if you were to metabolize it in the process of weight loss? I've never heard an answer to that made sense to me.
Well, I'll look at studies and I'll listen to what people have to say, but ultimately I look at myself, and I have never felt better in my entire life than by eating more animal protein than ever before, and definitely lots of fat. And, if that means I'm going to live 10 years fewer, well, shit, at least they're going to be quality years.
Yeah, I have the same feeling towards that.
Is my audio coming through?
Yes.
Excellent. Pleasure to meet you, Carneval.
Hello, you are?
Magnus.
Nice to meet you.
Pleasure to come on. SD, how the hell did you get on this stream? I'm interested.
SD?
Hello? SD?
Probably making a green smoothie or something.
Perhaps.
From what if I may jump in, he just he likes to follow these carnivore or carnist vegan debates, and he's always contributing. He's a mod on a few channels. He just asked me he wanted to chime in on what just transpired with I forgot his name already. Brandon. So that's why he's here. Why are you here?
Oh, interesting. Oh, well, I saw SD was on the stream. I was like, I wonder if I could get on, because I've watched some of Carnival's content. I would say I do find your content entertaining. But ideally, I would like to give you some feedback on your debate with Perspective Philosophy.
Okay.
So I'm gonna be blunt with my point on this, but I think Perspective Philosophy trounced you in that debate. I think the issue is that, and this isn't a harsh criticism of you as a person, but I think your lingo when it comes to ethics is a bit underdeveloped perhaps in comparison to your knowledge on topics such as health, which you clearly have more of an interest in. So I was wondering if you would like to discuss that, and perhaps I could send you on the right direction for future debates along those lines. Because the ethics is what I'm interested in debating veganism.
I'm good, but thanks for the offer.
Oh, okay. So, all right. So, what are you discussing at the moment on the stream?
Food
in general.
Yeah, well, I just hopped on and
yeah, we're just shooting the shit.
Yeah. Okay.
Eating fat, animal protein, stuff like that. Are you a vegan, Magnus?
No.
Oh, okay.
He's no more a vegan than I am.
He's hunter on a bi-weekly basis, and definitely not a vegan.
All right.
What have you got there, Carnival? Wasn't very clear.
Eggshells.
Ah, okay. Cool.
Anyway,
I guess it's gone a bit stale now.
yeah, I mean, we've kind of been all over the place. I don't know if you guys have anything else you want to say, anything else you're interested in.
I said my bit. I don't know. What about the other guys? Magnus, you have any points you want to bring up?
I'm afraid of engaging Magnus. I mean, you know.
Yeah, it's the mask, isn't it?
No, I mean, you have it all figured out, and I don't. So, you know, I like me and the way I figured it out for me. So, I'd rather that not change. And you know, if indeed you think you could convince me that I'm wrong on something, that's actually very scary. You know, because hey.
Well, it depends on how you look at it.
What were one
you
of
know?
the points, Magnus? What were one of the points that you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, sure. The thing that I noticed in the perspective philosophy debate was that during the debate on ethics, you know, you kept trying to bring it back to that territory that I think you find comfortable, which is the health and the nutrition aspect of it, which I think was a bit of a failing on your part because perspective philosophy wasn't really interested in that. You know, he was pretty much willing to concede on, you know, the points and several points of it just to get to the ethics. And then once we got to the ethics, you had the underdeveloped lingo where you were essentially saying, well, I find murder to be wrong because murder is wrong, which is a tautology, which is to say you just, you know, wording the same thing again and again without getting to a deeper meaning behind it.
What if there is no deeper meaning behind it?
Well, I would contest that there is a deeper meaning behind it. You know,
That's
to
your
say
opinion. That's your opinion.
Well, it depends on the perspective. It depends upon the perspective we take upon philosophy. So, as someone who's a moral realist, I would argue that there are objective facts of the universe. I would argue that, in fact, linguistically speaking, murder is wrong by definition, but then it conspires into what is defined as murder. So, when perspective philosophy is talking to you about, you know, the differences between killing another human being and killing an animal, and going down that line. And I'm pretty sure you've just, I didn't catch most of the stream, but you've just done the stream on Name the Trait, right? So when the vegans are going down these lines of philosophical inquiry, they're trying to get to the core of what differentiates a human, you know, the ethos of the human, the ethics of how we treat humans in comparison to how we treat animals. And, you know, they use plenty of, well, yeah, name the trait is a, you know, argument that's going around a lot nowadays. Marginal cases was another. These are arguments that they use because they want to, you know, essentially nail you to a post and go, all right, you know, you've either contradicted yourself or, you know, with name the trait in particular, the two conclusions of that argument is either, well, the vegans' perspective on the two conclusions of that argument is you either assume an absurd position of which people won't acknowledge or, you know, address because, you know, it's just silly. It's like, you know, eating babies or whatever, or they say you contradicted yourself. Now, I don't think those are the two possible outcomes of name the trait, but that is what the proponents of the argument believe is the case. So when it comes to debating these things, I think it's important to develop the language to be able to go beyond just saying murder is wrong because murder is wrong, because I do think there is a deeper truth there beyond just simply stating it, because being able to express why you think we should treat humans differently and why you think animals should be treated differently is a useful skill to have, especially in these ethical debates.
Well, first of all, I was fucking around with the kid, all right? Because he completely rejects reality. And sometimes I just get tired of the bullshit, this whole philosophical bullshit, because my whole thing was that you cannot divorce ethics from the conversation when humans, it has not been demonstrated at the very least, humans can survive without eating meat. Okay, so that was my whole point. And I know we spent a long time discussing that, but that's only because he contested me on that point. He didn't have to. He could have just agreed, and he could have agreed to have a mock debate in his little philosophical realm that has nothing to do with reality. Now, insofar as murder being wrong because it's wrong, I just really didn't want to. I'll tell you this much. I hadn't sat there and thought exactly why I think that is, because I never had to, because and I gave him some possible explanations. Well, it could be because I was brainwashed to believe this, and this is just ingrained in me. It could be because some higher power put that in me. I don't necessarily have to commit to anything because, well, unless you disagree, which is fine. I just didn't think I had to necessarily commit to anything because ultimately, this is just, I just know this with my entire being, and I don't think I have to be able to explain why. If it could be that this is just innate, it's instinctual, right? Why can't it be instinctual? Why does it have to be rationalized with words all the time?
Well, I think that is a argument you could go down. You could go for a naturalistic explanation in which we are saying the reason why we treat other human beings as other human beings is because of these instincts that we have, that come from the way we have evolved evolutionarily throughout the thousands of years of tribal living we've had. I think it's a quite pessimistic view on the human condition, and I know you're saying you don't want to commit to any particular philosophical view in particular, which is a fair enough statement to have, especially when you might not have the knowledge or the particular interest in it to have developed an understanding of one position deeply in particular. The thing I would say is if you're to go down the naturalistic path, it does commit you to several different things of which you might not want to be. There is differing explanations for why. The higher power approach is another one that I think you can go down. If you go into that, you have to start arguing theology, however, which gets way more complicated than even even the moral philosophical discussions we're having. Trust me.
But what it sounds like to me you're doing is shaping your moral outview or your philosophy based on how you could win a debate, or what's the most logical, how you could avoid getting put in a corner in any particular debate. Whereas to me, I'm not really interested in any of that because this is just how I feel. And I think for me, that's legitimate. Now you could reject that. You could say that like I'm uneducated and all that other stuff. I don't have the, sophisticated lingo or whatever the hell it is.
I think what you are feeling is legitimate, but I think it is useful to have the articulation of that emotive idea, that intuition you have.
What I'm trying to say is that mine is organic, yours is contrived. That's what I'm trying to imply here. Like it might be.
What do you mean by contrived?
It might be very much logical because it makes sense, or no one's been able to debunk what it is you say, and maybe you think you're right, but it didn't happen organically. You had a debate with yourself, and you came to these conclusions, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. But what I'm saying is, why do I have to constantly debate with myself? Why can't I just accept things as this is what they are because that's the way they are? Because I got other things to do. For example, I know this is not how you operate, right? But that's because you are who you are and I am who I am. And if things are intuitive for me and this is what they are, why is that not legitimate? Or what's the problem that you have with it? I don't understand necessarily.
Well, I just think if you're going to be getting into debates, particularly on ethics, with people like perspective philosophy, who are experienced in debating such matters, these are useful skills to develop so you can articulate better these intuitions and these emotions and these organic feelings that you're having. I don't know what you mean by contrived versus organic in this sense, because a lot of the philosophy that I have built, of course, starts with intuition. It's just that with the intuition that I have initially experienced, I've also sat down and gone, okay, so I feel like, this, X is occurring, and human beings are X, and human beings are morally valuable, or animals are not. They have moral consideration. And I've sat down and I've gone, okay, I have this intuition, I have this, as you would describe it, organic feeling, and then I will go, why? Why is this the case? If I am to look at why I have, this intuition, and I examine it, I can start constructing a system from that initial framework, from that initial intuition, to establish and articulate why that is the case, which then allows me, when I'm debating perspective philosophy, which I've done, I believe 3 times now on his YouTube channel, to actually be able to understand, the points he makes, and to be able to counter them using his own language, and using his using the philosophical lingo and the philosophical tongue, well, essentially just having to say murder is wrong.
But tell me why his philosophy is relevant when he rejects reality. Like, why should I even respect his philosophy at all? And that's kind of why I was being a dick to the guy a little bit, and I didn't want to be cooperative because, well, I mean, you completely reject reality. You live in La La Land, so why should I? How is that pragmatic or even relevant? Why do I need to engage in the madness that is, everybody could survive and thrive on the plant-based diet when we all know that that's not the case? Why do I have to step into this philosophical realm when he completely rejects reality?
Well, because even, people who may be rejecting the reality of the situation, let's say, let's just assume that, veganism is unhealthy in comparison to an omnivorous or, more carnivore-based diet. Let's just assume that, all right? There could still be a case to be made if he has this ethical conviction and this ethical belief that it is worth the sacrifice in health because of the fact that, this great injustice is being done to these animals, which he believes is of moral worth. So even assuming that it is the case that, veganism is more unhealthy in comparison to omnivorism or carnism, let's just assume that for the case, which he, I believe he ends up doing about like an hour into the debate you had with him. Let's just assume that is the case. He could still make a convincing argument if he has the ethics and the morals on his side to say, all right, so what is the minimum amount of meat we have to eat? So we don't have to kill as many animals as we do, because I think they're morally valuable, and here's why. And then he could go down.
Oh, sorry, carry on.
And then he could, push it in that extent. He could go, all right, so what's the bare minimum? What is the amount of health, we can be willing to sacrifice? How much health can I obligate people to sacrifice to be considerate towards these morally valuable beings, which is his premise, that is, animals are morally valuable?
Yeah. I was going to ask
Go
a
ahead.
question. I mean, wouldn't that argument assume that it would be morally superior to sacrifice your own health?
Well, that's gonna be his position, assuming the premise of the debate, which is, veganism, health-wise, is, worse than omnivorism and worse than carnism. Let's just assume that is the case. When he's still going to go, well, yeah, but ethically speaking, it's still the superior position, and it's how much we can obligate.
How can it be? You'd have to be, well, not you, obviously, but he'd have to be arguing that it would be ethically superior to sacrifice your own health in pursuit of not killing anything else. Yeah. That's a problem.
So no, not really. It only is if you reject positive rights. Problem. Well, it's only a problem if you reject positive rights, which I don't believe is the case. And if we actually look at some of the most moral figures,
all moral or ethical veganism arguments assume negative rights. That's the starting foundation. It's the right to not be something, like the right to not be killed, not be raped, not be murdered.
And in this, all right, in this, hypothetical we're talking about, where we've just conceded the point, that veganism is more unhealthy than it is in comparison to an omnivore diet or a carnivore diet. Assuming that, when the vegan can go, all right, But positive rights, right? Positive rights, all right? I'm going to argue from a position of positive rights, right? So I'm steel manning and constructing the vegan argument that would be best be made. They would construct an argument saying, all right, we understand that health-wise, we're going to have to sacrifice a bit. So how much can we curb, first off, the first
where do you draw the line?
Yeah, exactly. How much can you obligate people to,
I don't think you can. I don't think you can obligate anybody to sacrifice their health.
And that's where the debate would lie.
Look,
that's what I brought that up in my debate with Perspective Philosophy, and he agreed with me. You can't.
As soon as his health fails on the vegan diet, he's gonna be eating animals and doing so happily. So, fuck his philosophy, man. That shit ain't worth a good goddamn from where I'm coming from. And if you don't like, if you don't like my language, I could understand that. I could respect that. But like, truthfully,
man, you shouldn't fucking swear on a live stream. God fucking damn it, bastard.
I mean, I do admit I was a little bit rude to the guy here and there, but that's because to me, he came off very pretentious and he just assumed a whole bunch of stuff that simply isn't true. And I know this isn't the realm of philosophy, but I don't divorce, reality from these intellectual pursuits that some of you guys are more interested in. You know what I mean? For me, I guess I'm a jack of all trades, and maybe you're more of a specialist, Magnus. But like when it really comes down to it, all this mumbo jumbo about being ethical, all this other shit. As soon as his health fails, he's gonna be eating that steak yet again, and that's really the reality of it. You know what I mean?
I don't know. It really depends on to what extent people are willing to sacrifice their health.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody is prepared to just to take an extreme example, if somebody is prepared to die for veganism, that's on them.
Yeah, and I think this case of positive rights, I think the argument against positive rights in many cases, to argue, for example, just assuming the premises that veganism, I'm going to assume two premises here, right? But veganism is going to sacrifice a bit of health, and that veganism is the quote unquote morally superior position, all right? Mm-hmm. If that is the case,
that's a lot of assumptions, but okay.
Yeah, that's two assumptions, all right? But what I'm saying is if Carneval wants to go into these future debates in future, it would be better for him to develop this kind of language to be able to contest, especially the second premise.
Sure, but I mean,
assuming these premises, here's what I'm going to argue. All right, assuming these two premises, all right, they would have a leg to stand on to obligate people towards veganism or to a position as close as possible to veganism, because they would have the ethical high ground.
I would still reject it because you can't obligate people to give a shit about their own health. You can't.
You can. It's called positive rights.
You can't. You can't obligate me to care about my health. I could be doing all sorts of things that are bad for my health. You cannot morally obligate me to reverse anything that I do.
You can, under several different frameworks. It's called positive rights. It's been implemented in certain areas.
I know what it's called. I know where you're coming from, but you
I know you're rejecting it. And I don't know you. Well, yes, you can. You can do it from the state. What makes you think it is a physical impossibility to start enforcing positive rights, especially through coercive or
my body? If I want to do something unhealthy to it, I get to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all right. And what happens when the state, for example, let's say you're a smoker. What happens when the state prohibits
something that relates to me?
Yeah, the state prohibits tobacco, and unlike the failed war on drugs, they actually seriously crack down on it.
That's not a moral obligation. That's a legal imposition.
Yeah. What I'm saying is that you can back it up. How did you think prohibition in America started? It was a moral obligation.
Also got reversed.
It got reversed because it was a failed implementation of the law, and it only got reversed in.
Because
it only got reversed. It's still in place to some states today.
You cannot morally obligate people to not destroy their own liver. If somebody wants to drink themselves to death, they can do that. They can do it legally, and it's their own body,
They can't do it
They
legally
get to-
if the
yes, they
law
can.
legislates against it. Like, you know, what
Which
happened
it
in
doesn't.
America during the Prohibition era, what happened during the drug war that was still in against cannabis. It happens all the time.
Those aren't moral obligations. Those are health endorsements.
Oh, okay. Health endorsements. So
Sure, I mean,
the
you want to
Prohibition,
say,
which was
if you want to say that somebody, like, if you're a
spearheaded
heroin
by
addict, you get
hang on. So the Prohibition, which
I
was
have that.
spearheaded by, in particular, Christian advocates
Mhm.
who hated alcoholism, saw it as the root of all evil, who saw it as a major moral issue of the time.
They
So
did
much
see
so,
it as a moral issue. Yeah.
yep, they saw it as a moral issue, right?
Was
and they were
it
constantly
a moral
preaching about
issue?
it. Was alcoholism a moral issue? Yeah, and it still is.
I don't think so.
You don't think alcoholism isn't a moral issue?
Not really. It's not a moral issue. It's a health issue for sure.
So you don't think, you know, the ethical effects of selling alcohol to people and that leading to higher rates of domestic violence, drink driving accidents, etc. None of these are of any ethical concern.
Let's go to my situation, right? This isn't even a hypothetical one. I live on my own. If I want to drink myself to death, I get to do that. You don't get to tell me that I can't do that. Because it's my body, right? It's not yours.
Yeah, and you're arguing from a position of bodily autonomy, to which the reply will be,
Which
your body
everybody has, by the way.
Only, you know, if the state actually backs it.
You don't have bodily autonomy?
Well, it depends on which state I live in. For example, there are many
who's
states.
controlling you?
You are aware, right, that there are many states, you know, for example, I believe California recently legislated it.
Maybe so. I can't control that.
Yeah, okay. So in California, right, if my memory serves me right, vaccinations are now mandatory for.
Wait, are you saying that what's lawful is necessarily ethical? Like,
yeah,
that's not my argument at all. It's just that SD is saying that, you know, you can't do these things, and I'm saying yes, you can.
You can't. You cannot obligate me to care about my health. You can't. In any sense of the word obligation, you can't morally obligate me. You can't legally obligate me. There's nothing
I can't
you
legally
can do.
obligate you. I've already provided an example of that.
No, you can't. If I want to drink myself to death in the privacy of my own home, there is nothing you can do.
I've already cited several examples. The war on drugs, the California bill that was recently passed that forces mandatory vaccination, the prohibition in America. These are numerous cases where the moral has bled into the state. The state has used its authoritative power to take away your method of drinking yourself to death.
No, you can't. You can't take away anybody's method of drinking themselves to death. You can tell people that they shouldn't do it, and you can give health advice, and that's completely fine. I take no issue. But you cannot morally obligate me. If I want to sit in my house on my own and drink myself to death, there's nothing you can do. That's fact.
No, it's not fact, because I've just given you numerous examples. Fact. The state can intervene. The state can intervene. They can take away your booze. They can ban the substance to begin with. And then, for example, they could put you under a mental health care
now
act.
We're in hypothetical la-la land. So as long as somebody is of a sound mind...
This isn't hypothetical la-la land. This was the state of America during the Prohibition.
I don't live in America, and America isn't even under Prohibition anymore.
Yes, but it was for decades. That's the point. It's happened in the past.
Slavery was good for decades. Do you want to go back to that?
I'm not even claiming this is good. You're saying it's impossible. My whole argument is it is possible. It's happened in the past. It happens today with cannabis.
So World War II happened in the past. Is it going to be a repeat
and World War III could happen. Is that an impossibility?
I wouldn't say it's an impossibility, no, but it takes nothing away from my point.
Yes, it does, because you're saying it's impossible. I'm saying, well, here's
I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying
so you can see that
cannot
point.
Morally... Yes, I can see that
Okay,
point.
so it is possible through the state
I'm not saying...
to enforce these... All right, so we can obligate you through coercive means, can we not?
You can force people to do things. Yeah, I can force you to suck my dick.
Yeah, that is an obligation.
Oh, you're obligated to suck my dick.
If you have a gun to my head, I am.
Jesus Christ.
How is that ethical?
Oh, we're not even in the realm of ethics anymore. We're just discussing
No, we
the
have
possible.
wandered off topic, but it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. We can carry on with this.
Sure. So where were we on ethics? We're talking about positive rights and veganism.
We were
Yeah. So
before you admitted that I could obligate you to suck my dick.
with a gun to my head, you certainly could. I think I would be obligated.
You wouldn't be
if I wanted to keep my life.
obligated because you would have an option. You
Yeah,
have the option not to do it.
The option is, all right, engage in coitus with your fellatio, engage in fellatio with your membrane, or get my brains blown across
To people
across the
who don't
wall.
understand
Real
what
choice.
that means, it just means suck my big fat hard dick. But
Yes.
And I just got demonetized because of some guy Magnus I've never met before. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
You're welcome, man.
I'm just kidding. But hey, before you guys kill each other, which would be completely unethical, Magnus, is there any way you could explain to me, in hopefully under 5 minutes, the genesis of these, or the origin of these objective morals, objective morality, as what perspective philosophy was trying to do?
Oh, sure.
That doesn't include God in the way he was doing.
Can do, yeah. I don't need to include God. I am a theist, but I don't need to include it for the sake of this argument. So I'm not an objectivist in the same sense that perspective philosophy is. I'm a moral realist. I believe there are things such as moral facts. So I will argue for an incredibly easy fact right now, right? So premise one, for there to be value, there must be an evaluator. Any rejections? No? All right, we all agree. So for there to be value, there must be someone to evaluate. Premise two, there are evaluators, all right? There are evaluators, and we can establish a criteria that, if reached, makes someone an evaluator, all right? And I can go through that premise. So now having established this, all right, having established what value is and where it comes from, we can now talk about intrinsic versus extrinsic value. So assuming that there is an evaluator comes into existence. So someone like you and I, someone who is a sapient, conscious being, right? A being like that comes into existence. They are able to assign value to things. The first thing that they must necessarily assign value to is themselves, because that is the first thing they're aware of. That's what their senses tell them. You know, you must have that relation of self with the rest of the world to be able to do anything, essentially, to be able to have what I would define as consciousness, which in the theory of mind is called secondary consciousness, but that's a bit technical. So essentially, an evaluator comes into existence. Value comes from this evaluator. The first value assigned is the internal value to this evaluator. So that is intrinsic moral value. And I say, as a moral fact, that there are beings who possess intrinsic moral value. And there is a specific criteria for this, which I've laid out in the past. I would lay out the criteria if I was to be put in a situation like name the trait, where I would say, all right, name the trait. I would say sapience, which is a multifaceted trait made up of complex language, secondary consciousness, and a degree of intelligence, so like the capacity to learn, essentially. So with all those three things in mind, you can have an evaluator, a being who can create value. The first thing they assign value to is themselves. That is intrinsic value, and that is present in most of the human species. And that is a moral fact.
But that's subjective.
No, it's mind independent.
How so?
All right, so let's say I enter a room, and I enter a room with SD, all right? Our relationship is extrinsic to ourselves. So the relationship between me and him, us having a conversation, the value we're placing on each other is extrinsic. Then let's say I exit the room, all right? SD is still there, and he's still giving value to everything in the room. He is still giving value to himself as an evaluator because he's able to create value, all right? Then I enter the room. There is still value there, but I've also added my value. I am intrinsically valuable just as SD is. We're having this extrinsic relationship with each other. I'm intrinsically valuable. SD is extrinsically valuable. And then we finish our next conversation. SD leaves the room. And then yet again, I have intrinsic value. There's still value in the room, despite the fact that an SD is left. This value is based upon evaluators, not on any particular evaluator. And then I leave the room, and then let's just assume, for the hypothetical, both me and SD lack object permanence. So me and SD have both left the room. I would say there is no value in that room, because any evaluator, anything, an entity that can create value is no longer in the premises. So since both evaluators have left, no value. If there's an evaluator there, there is value.
But it sounds like you're saying the value exists outside of the person.
Extrinsic value is value placed upon an object or a relationship with someone else.
Placed upon another being able to.
But ultimately, it's in the head of the subject. This value.
Oh yeah,
it doesn't exist.
The extrinsic value is a creation of the mind. It is a mental construct. It's an idealistic sense rather than a spatial sense. But that does not mean it doesn't exist, unless we are to deny that phenomenological experience exists, the experience, the thoughts that are going through your head right now. If we are to deny that this kind of value doesn't exist, we're to call it a delusion or an illusion. We're to deny that the very makeup of our experience is an illusion and is fake and is not real.
So
and if we go into that territory,
we could just jump straight to hard solipsism, and you can't disprove that.
Well, if you go to that territory, I'd ask why you're talking to yourself. I'm a figment of your imagination if you're a hard solipsist.
I made up all of the songs that I like, and including all of the ones that I don't like.
Yeah, if you want to be in a position of hard solipsism, I can't argue against it because it's an absolutely insane position.
Well, of course it is.
The only retort I have is, why are you talking to yourself? It's a bit weird.
Well, it entertains me.
Solipsism, for those unaware, just for the benefit of the audience, is essentially the position that there is only one mind in the universe, that all other minds are essentially illusions and specters, and the entire universe is just essentially the playground of one conscious experience.
Yeah, or more succinctly, it is the position that the only thing that you can be sure of the existence of is your own mind. You can't be sure of anything else.
I still don't see how that's objective. It sounds like without the subject, it doesn't exist. This value doesn't exist. So
if I was to die
under that situation.
So it is objective in the sense that it is mind independent. It is about minds, but it is still mind independent. So
how is it mind independent?
Because it is not dependent upon me ontologically. So let's say I die tomorrow. All right, I die tomorrow. All right. What I'm talking about is still present in the broader world in 7 billion people. There are still evaluators running around, still creating value.
But you wouldn't know that under solipsism.
I wouldn't know that under solipsism, but a position of absolute skepticism is just a bit silly, so I'm not going to go there.
But it needs other subjects. Just because you're not here, it still needs other subjects.
Exactly, but it's not a subjective experience because it's not related to anyone. It's about minds, but it's mind independent, and that's the kind of beauty of it. So it is talking about mental constructs, but it's a fact that these mental constructs exist. It's a fact, morally speaking, this intrinsic moral value exists purely just based off the fact that people assign value to themselves as soon as they become an evaluator.
They do, but how is that relevant?
It's relevant in describing something that's an objective feature of the world, which I was asked to do, and that's a moral fact.
A moral fact?
Yeah.
Explain how it's a moral fact.
It's to do with morals, and it is a moral fact that evaluators possess intrinsic moral value.
That sounds circular to me.
That's what I said.
Circular.
It's an objective fact that objective observers place objective value upon themselves, and that's true because they objectively do it.
Where did I say they placed objective value on themselves? I said they placed intrinsic value on themselves.
Okay, so which is internal to oneself, sure.
Yeah.
So, right, okay, swap the words then. It's not going to make any difference to what I'm saying.
It makes a massive difference.
No, you place intrinsic value upon yourself, and that is objectively true because you place it upon yourself.
No, that's not my argument. The argument for why it is objectively true is that we establish in the first premise that value comes from an evaluator, correct?
That would be subjective, no?
It's subjective in the sense that it's coming from the mind, but it's not subjective in the sense that it's dependent upon any one subject. So you're right in that it is a construct of the mind. But what I'm talking about here is the
Sure, we can go with that. That's not
minds.
unreasonable.
So you have to look at it not from the perspective of one mind, but of all minds. Of, you know, if you essentially get a line of the human race together and you have there like a visualization, like a little brain bubble of their minds ahead, we're not just looking at any one subject. We're not looking at something that's subjective. We're looking at something that's objectively true across all of these minds.
Yeah, because
Well,
but that sounds like people agree on something, so it's objective just because we agree on something.
Not because it's agreed, no, because
it seems superficially true. It's like it's a deepity. It's
so for the first point, it's not because we agree on it. It's because it's because we have come to an agreement, certainly about how value comes about. So if you want to use a different word for what value is, but I think this is how value works. In that value comes from an evaluator. And no one disagreed and no one rejected it when I first suggested that premise. If anyone wants to do so now, feel free.
No, I'm still thinking about it.
Yeah, okay. So value comes from an evaluator, all right? Human beings are on the whole evaluators, all right? We have the capability, we're sapient, we have complex language, we're incredibly intelligent, we have the cognitive complexity. Knowing this, all right, we assign value to things as evaluators. The first thing we assign value to is ourselves, because that's the first thing our senses tell us about. We have an awareness of self in relation to the rest of the world, because we wouldn't be able to say anything about the rest of the world. We wouldn't be able to give any value to the rest of the world if we didn't have that awareness of self. So, with this awareness of self, we assign ourselves intrinsic moral value, and that is an objective moral fact.
So what's the conclusion?
The conclusion is that there exists moral facts, and here's one of them.
Go on. What, that you just said is a moral fact?
That's a moral fact, yeah.
I'm not seeing that.
How are you not seeing it? It's mind independent. It's about morality. It's a moral fact. It's to do with intrinsic
morality would be just like what I consider moral to myself, which would back up exactly what I said about 10 minutes ago.
What you consider, but that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something, about.
You wanted to prove that there are moral facts.
You're talking about something that's normative. Yeah. So in order to talk about moral facts, right? So a moral fact is a fact. It's something that's objective, rather than something we can just change in a whim. Something that's subjective.
So is it immoral for me to kill myself with alcohol? As long as nobody else is affected.
That's nothing to do with what I'm talking about. That's normative. That's nothing to do with the meta-ethics.
Okay, so work it into a meta-ethical framework then.
It's impossible because it has nothing to do with meta-ethics. It's to deal with how I should
why bring it up?
Live a good life. Why bring it up? Because you brought it up. You just mentioned.
I didn't bring it up. I didn't say anything about meta-ethics.
Because you're telling me to do the impossible. You're telling me
I just asked you a question.
Yeah, you're asking me to use a field of philosophy that has to do with the outside of ethics, and then you're asking me to, tell you why
we're talking about ethics.
Is bad. We're talking about ethics. Yeah, there's many layers to ethics.
Let my uneducated ass chime in for just a second, please. Let's say, because this is what I understand. If all of us look at the sky and we evaluate it to be blue, right? That still doesn't make the sky objectively blue just because we say it. It's just because we perceive it to be that. Just because we evaluate it to be blue. The sky isn't objectively blue. It still requires subjects, such as ourselves, to say that it is. Other animals might see a different color, right? It's not objectively blue. So this is an analogy I could draw, but maybe I'm missing something here.
So sure. Not to pick on the analogy, but I think it's a bit of a false equivalence because it's describing a very particular phenomenological experience, which is color, which is very subjective. And I'm making no claims about this value being true or not. Someone might value themselves, far below, what someone else would say their value is. Someone might overvalue themselves, someone might undervalue themselves.
80% of people think they're above average.
Yeah, all I'm talking about is that value exists. And intrinsically, value exists in every being that's an evaluator. So it's not an agreement, as long as the first premise is allowed to stand, which no one has come up with an objection to or a rejection.
What about beings that aren't evaluators?
They're not intrinsically morally valuable.
So as long as it's not capable of morally valuing anything, as far as you can work out, it's probably okay to kill it then.
Yeah, like, unless we're to talk about in relation to other, valuable things, like intrinsically valuable things. Like, I don't give much consideration to a TV just on its own, but if it's a friend's
Sure,
TV,
but I mean, nobody would ever argue that it's a moral valuator.
A TV is a moral evaluator.
Yeah, nobody would ever argue that it is.
No one would argue that, but I'm telling you why. I think a TV in a junkyard is trash. I'm like, oh, screw it. But like, I respect my friend's TV because it's like in relation to them, they have.
Sure, this is like if you borrow a car kind of thing. You might take better care of it even than you do your own car because it belongs to somebody else. Sure, I agree.
Sure.
What about living creatures that are not moral evaluators?
Well, that's just most animals. In such cases, we don't give them any more consideration, any more so than we give them utilitarian consideration.
Is that the reason why we don't, though?
Is it the reason why we don't?
Yeah.
I'd argue that it's a probable reason why we don't. If we don't have the ability to articulate it, the fact that we can recognize in most animals the case that they don't have this intrinsic moral worth. That's probably why the animals we've domesticated.
So what if, as a subjectivist, I don't consider that your dog is a moral evaluator? That means I can kill it.
Well, it wouldn't be as bad as killing a being that's intrinsically morally valuable. What I'd be arguing from is a position of you've smashed my plasma screen TV. You're essentially going in and you're damaging something in relation to a being which is intrinsically morally valuable and is an evaluator. Not to you, but to that being.
And it's all
we recognize
subjective.
Such beings. Well, I reject that it's all subjective, and I think you're wrong.
But already established subjective. All I have to do is declare that I don't think your dog is a moral evaluator.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think my dog's a moral evaluator either. I think my dog's property. And it's property.
Okay, so we agree. We both agree. Your dog is not a moral evaluator. I am a subjectivist now, for the sake of this, and I get to kill your dog. Then, do you not have a problem with it?
Of course, I have a problem.
I know you do.
Yeah, of course I have a problem with it because it's my property, and you're essentially.
So there wouldn't be. Yes, I'm deconstructing your argument. So there wouldn't be any difference between me smashing your TV up and me smashing your dog up. That's what you're saying.
What, like morally speaking, like there are probably items that I have.
Well, your dog isn't a moral evaluator. You just agreed.
Yeah.
Your TV cannot be a moral evaluator.
Yeah, and
so
I'm about to explain to you, but there are probably inanimate objects that I have that are worth more to me than my dog.
So what you're saying,
they can't be evaluators. Inanimate objects cannot be moral evaluators.
I never said that.
Cannot be.
I don't know what you're hearing. I never said that.
So wouldn't it follow that your dog is at least more? I mean, I'm trying to steel man you here. Your dog is at least more of a moral evaluator than your TV.
No, I don't think you're following my argument at all. My dog only has value in relation to me. The extrinsic value I'm placing.
Okay, so it doesn't have value to me, which is what I said 2 minutes ago.
Yeah. So you're a subjectivist, but it does have value to me. So in such a case, you as a Nietzschean, as someone who's going full will to power, I'm just going to have to answer with force because you're not understanding the facts and reality.
Now you don't have moral value to me. I don't consider you to be a moral evaluator, so I get to smash you to bits.
Well, I think you're just a crazy person at this point. You're talking about things that are just objectively wrong, as I've already established. You're essentially saying, I'm going to just assume a subjectivist position where, I get to smash things and you're wrong, and I just reject it as incoherent.
Well, you can reject it as incoherent, but I'll reject that you're a moral evaluator.
Yeah, you can reject them, a moral evaluator. You're wrong.
So where does this get you?
Where does this get me? It gets me the fact that I was asked to name an objective moral fact. I've done so, and the only way you can combat it is by rejecting reality.
I'm not rejecting reality.
Yes, you are.
You're the one that wants to compare a living being to a TV and say that they have the same capacity to evaluate. I didn't say that because I don't think that's true. Yes,
sorry,
he said yes.
Yeah. Sorry, what? You think a virus or an amoeba has the same capacity, more capacity to evaluate than something like a advanced computer? You think that's the case?
Sorry to interrupt, guys. I'm sorry. I don't think this is going anywhere.
It's not. It never.
Hey, maybe I'm just dense. Maybe just I'm not getting it, which is fine. But it would seem to me like if this is what perspective philosophy believes also as a source of objective morality, well, then it would be perfectly fine to eat animals then, wouldn't it? What do you say, Magnus?
Oh, this is not perspective philosophy's position.
Okay. He was arguing something similar to that, and it sounded subjective to me.
Yeah, he'll argue from a position of sentience, essentially. He'll argue from a position of, morality is based off a pleasure/pain matrix, and but since animals can feel pain and they have the sentience to the qualia to be able to not only have a sensation but to be able to understand I have a sensation. He argues that's the basis of morality, and I disagree with him on that.
It still sounds very subjective to me, but maybe I don't fully understand what subjective means. It just seems like without the subject, it's not even there. It doesn't exist. It's not. Now, what do you say to logic providing objective morality? Has anyone ever made that argument that it's moral because it's logical, or is that just
well,
because it makes sense?
So people certainly do use the logos argument. You do get arguments. I think that's essentially what a lot of things like nihilism are. It's going down the path of going, all right, what can we use with reason alone? All right. There was a great proclamation written, I believe, about a decade ago. If I can just bring it up, it was called Fides et Ratio, and it was by Pope John Paul, and it's a great little proclamation upon faith and reason, which is the English-sized Latin title. So using the Latin to say, using the reason on its own, the logic, that leads you to paths like absolute skepticism, absolute solipsism, nihilism, because these are things you can say with reason alone. And that's the position of many nihilists and such, where it's going, well, this is just how the universe is. I wish I could live in your magic fairyland of idealistic, fairies and morality, but really the universe operates like this. And you do get arguments like that from the nihilistic camp.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that, but again, I haven't really sat down to think about this very much. But something else I wanted to say, the chat seems a little bored, guys. I mean, this is very heady stuff, definitely, and most people don't get down with that. No. I just wanted to address something else you said about perspective philosophy. First and foremost, he came to me. He asked me to debate him. Now, if he's not familiar with how I debate, that's not my problem. He wanted to come to me. He stepped into my realm, and he essentially rejected it, and that's why I think that's why we didn't gel very well. Is because he's on a whole different planet, and I live on this one. So.
Well, yeah, that is the case. I think he's a nice dude, but I think his repertoire, his vocabulary, it's a bit, let's say, early 20th century tweed jacket wearing English gentleman. His vocabulary wise, I find it a bit difficult to follow him. He's a fast talker. He's on another plane. I think you said that right. When it comes to discussing these things, because he's in his world there.
I didn't have a particular problem with his vocabulary or his demeanor necessarily, but again, I am who I am, and he called me out. He should not have expected to be talking to Nietzsche or Plato or anybody else. He should have expected to be talking to me. So that's why I say he's a little out of touch with reality, is because he wanted to just drag me into this purely philosophical level that doesn't really deal with reality, my reality, and what I'm concerned with more so than what he is. I think, and that led him, I believe, to rejecting, the fact that people can't sustain, we as a species cannot sustain veganism. It's completely irrational, and I don't see how you could even begin to pretend to be a philosopher by rejecting that which is rational, by assuming irrational to be the truth. That's why I wasn't really willing to like get too philosophical with him, because his whole foundation to me is just, it's absurd. We can't, as human beings, we can't be, maybe certain individuals can for a decent enough amount of time, but us as a species, well, that rejects everything we know about where we
Well,
came from.
I think that's the interesting argument. If we just immediately concede the health is, can we, and to circle back to what SD and I were initially clashing over, assuming you're in such a position as a vegan and you acknowledge this, you just concede the health arguments. Can you argue from that position, we should give up X amount of meat because animals are morally valuable. We should, sacrifice X amount of health because animals are morally valuable. That's, I think, would be an interesting argument to make.
Yes, but the foundation for those arguments, again, rejects reality, which is that the vegan diet kills possibly more animals than a purely carnivorous diet. It rejects this reality that, it's out of touch with reality. Just because you're vegan, that doesn't automatically mean you're causing less harm. It doesn't automatically mean that you're better for the environment. Quite to the contrary, perhaps. So,
I agree on that territory. I don't think being vegan necessarily enshrines you, with this amazing moral superiority. I think it's often the case that you see.
No, you're wrong, because the consumption of fiber is directly proportional to the amount of compassion.
Of course, yeah. But you often you see the stereotypical vegan with like the Starbucks latte in hand, with like the Gucci designer handbag. You see stuff like that. But I don't think it's impossible to argue from such a position and go, well, as my veganism, let's just assume. All right, I'm gonna steel man the vegans here, and I'm going to assume the vegan position. All right, just conceding on all the health stuff, and I'm going to argue from the perspective of veganism versus the animal deaths and such. I'm going to go, all right, well, I'm a vegan, all right, and I believe that I can create a diet where it's going to minimize the amount of animal deaths, and that's my goal. And to do this, I'm going to eat this specialty diet, that's going to include lots of vitamins. It's going to include the bare minimum amount of meat I need to live because I've conceded the health stuff. I'm going to, I'm going to find a way. I'm going to find a mechanism where I can cause the least amount of animal deaths. How do you argue against such a position?
I just wasn't willing to concede any of those things. Really, that's what it comes down to. So we were just talking past each other mostly.
Yeah, the thing is though, Magnus, isn't that pretty much what you and I already do?
What in relation to eating the bare minimum of animals?
Yeah, the minimum amount of deaths for the meal that's on your plate, right? Because this is what I constantly argue.
Oh, I'm a bit of an anti-consumerist myself. Personally, when it comes to things like agriculture, I don't think vegan solutions are, the best solutions. I'm a big proponent of vertical farming, for example, which certainly doesn't necessitate the end of the animal agricultural industry.
No, not by far. But I mean,
are either of you familiar with vertical farming?
Sorry?
Are either of you familiar with vertical farming? It's fascinating technology.
I've never seen it up close and personal, but I mean, I've read some stuff. I haven't been able to go to anywhere where that's even a remote possibility. But like, you're sort of, you're living rural-ish, I guess. And people know where I live. I dox myself sometimes. So, like, my argument always is when I'm arguing with a vegan, what have you eaten today? And when it turns out, which is always the case, no exceptions, that the amount of animal deaths to put the food that I've got on my plate on it is less than the amount of animal deaths to put the food that they've got on their plate on it, I win at that point. Because if you want to argue from the moral high ground, you better make damn sure you actually occupy it first. And they never do.
Well, this might just be because you're, targeting some low-hanging fruit, I might say. I've watched.
Maybe, but I mean, if that's what we're measuring it by. Oh, did Magnus get?
Yeah, he just dropped off. There he goes.
Ah,
but I mean, this is the reality. I wouldn't say it's low hanging. Well, you could call it that, but this is the majority of vegans out there, I would argue.
Well, I also think it's the case that when it comes to morality in particular, many people are uneducated, vegans included.
Thing is, though, when I challenged, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just want to get this out there because it's quite an important point to mention. Like when I challenged the high-hanging fruit to a debate, they don't want to fucking know. As soon as they find out what my position is and what I do and why I do it, and that I've got the science and everything to back it up, all of a sudden, no, they don't want to debate no more. Apart from perspective philosophy,
SD, did you ever watch my ambush debate with Bryn?
No, I don't believe so.
I can give you a link to it afterwards. Yeah, it's my
whose channel is it on?
It's on Effie's. So let me tell you this. On this topic, all right. So I get ambushed by Bryn essentially on the name the trait formal critique that I was making, just because someone asked me to explain it, and then Ask Yourself just suddenly appears in the chat, the live stream chat, and it's bizarre, because this was a stream with perhaps 24 viewers at peak, yeah. and he's there just sniping in the chat for the entirety of the stream, and he's we invite him on, we're like hey man, if you want to defend your position, I'm free to do so. It seems kind of odd,
he was there today.
Bit bizarre.
He was here today as well. Not in the chat, but I think he was with our friend. God, why can't I remember his name? Brandon. I'm pretty sure he was. They were communicating during the debate because he sounded just like Ask Yourself and kept bringing him up all the time. It's a network of.
He was making the same arguments. I mean, he was definitely an Isaac clone. I mean, I'm not familiar with the guy, but I was watching him.
Well, I'll be sure to watch the stream back later. But yeah, it seems kind of odd that you're bringing that point up, SD. Have you heard that the fabled debate that was coming up between Shadow Starshine and Bryn hasn't occurred because Bryn conceded defeat?
I knew it wouldn't ever happen, but I wasn't aware that he'd conceded defeat.
No, he conceded. He's essentially quit. He's no longer arguing veganism, and he's no longer arguing defense of name the trait. Apparently.
Now that's interesting.
That is interesting. So, that leaves Ask Yourself or one of his mods to debate Shadow Starshine, which I don't think is going to happen because Ask Yourself is cucked out at every opportunity.
Yeah, well, that's what he does, isn't it? I mean, we know his style. I mean, Carneval knows his style. You know his style. I know his style.
He likes to pit low-hanging fruit, basically, and he still fails. So it is what it is. But hey, you mentioned vertical farming. What about it? Because I'm interested. I know a little bit about it. Aquaponics in a high-rise type of environment, that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah. I've been arguing a bit of vertical farming lately because I think it's a very promising technology. I've been looking into it lately. If I could just get up the guy whose theories I was looking into the other day.
It probably is a good idea.
The guy who conceived it. Yeah. You should look up the stuff they've done in Singapore. Sorry to cut you off, Carneval. It's they're beautiful buildings. That's the thing I like about vertical farming, right? It's combining this new neo-futuristic aesthetic, this architecture, with a Homestock-esque, romantic view of agriculture of the past. And it's also a really efficient means of producing food.
But
best of all worlds.
I don't know much about it to be criticizing it too much, but to me, it looks like it's very resource intensive. For example, you got to pump water up to whatever floor. you got to climate control, you got to do all these things. Doesn't that consume a lot for what it produces?
That is
I'd
a
always
astute
prefer
observation.
the natural method myself, but I guess there could be arguments to make for vertical
So,
farming.
Carnival, you are right. That is an astute observation in the fact that, yes, vertical farms do consume a lot of electricity and power in that means, which is why I'm also an advocate when it comes to power generation of nuclear power, because I think that's the best way for a energy source to be provided that
Fuck,
has the efficiency.
we
and
agree on
feasibility.
something amazing.
Yeah, nuclear power is great.
Bring it on.
But I think the issues that you raise, Carnival, in regards to the energy cost needed for a vertical farm can be overcome with the right investment and the right energy being put into it. So, essentially looking at optimizing the amount of electrical generation you do to be able to power things like vertical farms.
And I
Singapore
guess
has a
just
few
to,
examples of them already working. So it can work. It's just,
it's
working on the idea.
It's interesting, and I guess you could offset some of the costs, some of the consumption by putting them in cities where you don't have to truck the produce into the city from the farm out in the country anymore. So that definitely offsets some of the cost. But yeah, I just don't know enough about it. I guess I'll look into it.
I can also give you a couple of other benefits. So food miles is a big one, as you just said. But another thing is that because it's climate controlled, you can grow the same crop all year round.
Right.
There's no seasonal limit to being able to grow your crop, your agriculture, because of the amount of control they have over the light source and the temperature.
Less loss due to environmental factors.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
When it comes to things like pesticides, you have to use far less pest control because you're in a city. You have it in these self-contained tower blocks. It's a lot easier to keep out things like beetles, rats, etc. Rabbits in particular. You don't see rabbits scaling 60-foot skyscrapers.
Yeah, it's definitely a good idea in some contexts, and it could be useful. But to me, I'm just kind of biased against stuff like that because it's just Agenda 21. It's just getting people out of the country and into the cities, and ultimately, I know that's a whole different topic and that you might not be interested in.
No, I'm interested to discuss that topic of the urban versus rural. My counterpoint would be things like vertical farms are a great way of hybridizing the urban with the rural and bringing that rural sense back to the urban areas, to bring back nature, to bring back greenery. I think it's a great idea in many respects, but we have these vertical farms in these big cities because people have to cluster in these areas for jobs and stuff. It's a good idea to bring back nature in that sense.
Well, I'd be all okay with that as long as that doesn't come in conjunction with restricting access to the countryside or forest preserves and stuff like that to the citizen. I would be completely on board with stuff like that, so long as you could still do it the old-fashioned way, and that doesn't become an excuse for getting people out of the country and into the cities, which is
I think generally you should be allowed to, within reason, be able to do what you want with your land. So if you want to farm in a plot of land that you have, I believe you should be able to do that. In regards to the countryside, I think vertical farms would be good in many respects because it would lead in many respects, we wouldn't have to cut down so much forestry to be able to provide food. So it would actually allow us to reforest many areas because the land usage is so efficient, just in terms of production, that we would actually be able to give back to nature many areas that we've given over to human habitation.
Right on. I mean, it's definitely interesting, and I could see the benefits, no doubt. It's just, to me, I have a bit of an aversion to it because it's, Agenda 21, scary shit, basically. But that could be irrational. I don't know. Anyway, I'm tired, you guys.
Yeah, you want to bring it to a close?
Yeah, I would like to. So, if you want to say anything in closing, either one of you, both of you, that's cool. I'll just say thanks for coming through. It was nice to meet you, Magnus.
Pleasure to meet you.
I'm a bit of a dickhead, but your constructive criticism is definitely duly noted. Not to say I'm going to change, definitely not for you, but I definitely appreciate your input. And yeah, you're all right with me. And nice to meet you, SD. I know we've chatted a little bit here and there, but it was cool to finally talk in person, I guess, if you will. And anytime you're down to come through a live stream, you're more than welcome to. And the same goes for you, Magnus. Even though I'm not sure my the things that I'm into are necessarily what you're into, but be that as it may, you're still welcome anytime you feel.
Yeah, it was good fun. It's been a pretty long stream, all in all, I guess. By the time we came on and stuff, but yeah. Well, sometimes that's how things go. Known Magnus for a long time, and been following you for a while. Like I say, nothing against Foot Soldier or anybody like that. They're the cool vegans as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, it was nice chatting.
Right on.
Right, bon voyage.
Take it easy,
Later,
everybody.
Guys. See ya.
Pleasure to meet you.